After 7 years of living off the very house I bought, my son and daughter-in-law suddenly won $85 million. But instead of being grateful for the shelter I gave them, by noon that very day my daughter-in-law had cruelly thrown all my belongings out the window, china shattering across the street while she screamed, "We don't need to do charity for you anymore. Go die old in a nursing home." I stood in the yard, clothes dusty and rumpled, my heartbeat steady, and quietly said, "Did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" Her victorious smile froze for a split second, and soon that single question would make her glittering world collapse for good. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Lorraine Whitmore, 63, a widow for nearly a decade. Since Arthur passed, the two-story house in the suburbs of Savannah, Georgia, became my only refuge, and then my son Mason's as well, along with his beautiful but overly sharp wife, Betrayal. 7 years ago, when Mason lost his job and Betrayal was pregnant, they knocked on my door in a fall storm, soaked and shivering. I opened the door, didn't ask much, and just said, "Come in, this house always has room for you." From then on, we lived together 3 generations, seemingly peaceful until that fateful morning. That morning, I got up early as usual to make coffee and pancakes for the little ones, Ava, 8, and Micah, 5. But instead of the small footsteps chattering down the stairs, I heard a scream rip through the house from downstairs. "Mason, get up now!" Brielle's shrill voice rang out, bursting with excitement. I set the coffee pot down, heart pounding. I was used to my daughter-in-law's temper, but today there was something different: excitement, panic, almost mania. The wooden stairs shook as Mason ran down. I stayed at the top landing, holding my breath. A minute of silence. Then suddenly, shouts exploded. "No way. Oh my God, no way. We won, Mason. $85 million. $85 million. I looked down and saw Betrayal clutching the lottery ticket, trembling with excitement. Mason hugged her, laughing and repeating, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it." They both jumped up and down, tears streaming over young, hungry faces. And I, the one who bought that very ticket yesterday, with the numbers I've used for 20 years, each one a family birthday, stood frozen. My heart sank, not because of the money, but because they never asked, "Mom, is this your ticket?" I stepped halfway down the stairs, about to speak, when Betrayal turned, eyes blazing like someone who'd just found buried treasure. "We're rich, Mason. Finally, we don't have to live in this old house anymore." She said it and kissed the ticket like a trophy. I stopped. The words, "this old house," stabbed right through me. The home Arthur and I built with every saved dollar, every extra shift, every can of paint we rolled on with our own hands. I wanted to say I was the one who bought that ticket at the corner convenience store, but the words stuck in my throat. I looked at Mason, my only son, hoping he'd realize something. But he just stood there, letting Betrayal call the shots, like always. I went back to my small room in the attic, heavy-hearted. I brewed tea, but my hands shook so hard I spilled water on the table. For the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. About an hour later, I heard cars pulling up, nosy neighbors arriving after hearing about the lottery family. Laughter, doors slamming, glasses clinking. I looked out the window and saw Betrayal showing off, waving the ticket, and Mason beside her, smiling awkwardly. By noon, there was a hard knock on my door. Betrayal stood there, arms crossed, lips curled. "Start packing. We're moving, and we don't need any dead weight coming along." I didn't grasp it at first. "Dead weight?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "Yeah, we're buying a mansion. It wouldn't make sense for you to come. At your age, it's better to find a decent nursing home. They'll take care of you there." I looked her in the eye. "This is my house, Betrayal. Used to be, Lorraine," she said, emphasizing each word. "Now we have a new life. And you're not part of it." Then she yanked open the closet and started throwing my things, dresses, the wedding photo, a pottery vase I made when I was young. Everything went crashing into the yard below. I stood there, silent, while neighbors gathered and whispered. Mason stood on the threshold, hands in his pockets, face pale, but he didn't step in to stop his wife. "Brielle, stop!" he muttered, but she didn't listen. "We don't need to do charity for you anymore," she shouted, as if she wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. The words felt like a knife in my chest. I quietly bent down, picked up the shattered frame, and wiped the dust off with my sleeve. The elderly neighbor across the street hurried over to help me gather things, but I stopped her. "Thank you, but I can do it." I collected what was still intact, a few changes of clothes, a wedding photo, and a small box holding Arthur's ring. When a beat-up yellow cab pulled up, I stood, took a long breath. I turned to Mason, my son, whom I'd once believed would protect his mother for life. "You're not going to say anything?" I asked, calm and firm. He looked down. "Brielle, just went a little too far, Mom." "No, Mason," I said. "This is the choice you two made." I walked toward the gate, then stopped. Brielle stood there, arms crossed, still wearing that triumphant smile. I looked straight at her. "Did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" For a split second, that smile stalled. A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes, then she quickly feigned disdain. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I didn't answer. I opened the cab door, put my suitcase in the trunk, and told the driver softly, "Anywhere, with the cheapest rooms nearby." As the car pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. Mason stood frozen on the steps, the two little ones pressed to the upstairs window, eyes red-rimmed. Brielle turned away, pretending to be on the phone, but I could see her shoulders tighten. The room I rented sat above a Chinese restaurant. It barely fit a twin bed, a wobbly wooden table, and a window stuck in its frame. The smell of frying oil rose from downstairs, seeping into my hair and clothes. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my bag, and took out a paper folded in quarters, the purchase receipt. The scrawled Lorraine Whitmore in the signature box was still clear. I ran my finger over the name and heard Arthur's voice in my ear. "Always sign your name, Lorraine. People can forget everything else, but a signature never lies." I smiled faintly. Outside, the city buzzed, but in that tiny room I felt a strange peace. They thought I'd lost, but really, the game had only just begun. After Arthur was laid to rest, the house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking all night. I missed him, his tall, slender frame, the way he grumbled when I added extra salt to the stew, and that raspy laugh every early morning. Widowhood at 56 taught me to speak less and keep small rituals to feel like he was still around, pouring 2 cups of coffee each morning, straightening the armchair by the fireplace, sometimes whispering, "I'm okay, Arthur." Then, one February night in a downpour, Mason showed up. He stood on the porch, soaked, gripping a suitcase. Behind him was Brielle, makeup smeared, eyes red. "Mom, we lost the apartment. My company folded. The landlord wants rent now. We can't swing it." I opened the door without further questions and nodded. "Come in, this house always has room for you." Brielle thanked me, voice trembling. She was young, beautiful, and knew how to draw sympathy. That day I believed I was doing the right thing. I couldn't have imagined that Mason's just a few months would stretch into 7 years, 7 years of being the help in the very house with my name on the deed. At first, things seemed fine. I gave them the big downstairs room, the one Arthur loved for its east-facing windows. "Morning sun is good for the baby," I said. Mason squeezed my hand and smiled. "Thanks, Mom. I'll pay you back soon." But soon never came. After Ava was born, then Micah 2 years later, Brielle didn't return to work. Mason bounced between jobs, some months bringing home nothing. I covered every utility bill, groceries, and the homeowner's insurance with my teacher's pension and what little savings of Arthur's remained. I didn't regret it. I believed family love balances itself, that when they got stable, they'd lift me up in return. I remembered Arthur's words before he died. "If you can, don't let our kid know hunger, Lorraine." So I did everything to keep the house warm. Mornings I woke at 5 a.m., made breakfast for everyone, packed Mason's lunch, and took Ava to preschool. Afternoons I did laundry, cooked dinner, and rocked Micah to sleep. Everything ran like a clock I wound with my own hands. Then one day Brielle said, "Mom, I need a quiet place to work. My old company's letting me do consulting from home. Maybe you could move up to the attic. I'll turn your room into a home office." I hesitated. The attic was a storage space, low-ceilinged and sweltering in summer, but she said it in that syrupy tone. "It's more private up there. You can rest without the kids making noise." I forced a smile. "If it's convenient for you, do it." I didn't know that decision pushed me to the top floor of my own house and pushed me out of the role of mother in my family. From then on, I officially became Miss Lorraine upstairs. Brielle reorganized the kitchen and labeled everything top shelf for the kids, bottom shelf for Mason's snacks. That cabinet is where you can keep your tea. I didn't object, but I felt like a boarder. That winter, she started hosting adults-only dinners. I still cooked and set the table, but when dinner began, Brielle would smile and say, "Mom, I saved you a plate in the kitchen. We need to discuss work." I stepped out, closed the kitchen door, and ate alone under the yellow light. From the living room came laughter, clinking glasses, and Brielle talking like the lady of the house. I kept telling myself, "It's fine, they're young, they have their own lives. I just need to stay quiet." But silence, when long enough, becomes shackles. When Ava started talking, Brielle taught her to call me Miss Lorraine instead of Grandma. "Grandma sounds odd in the mouth, Mom," she said. "Miss Lorraine is younger and more polite." I laughed it off, but that night I cried in the bathroom. The next day I still made my granddaughter's milk as if nothing had happened. In the third year, Mason switched to part-time engineering. I asked about his pay. He avoided my eyes. "Enough to get by, Mom." I knew it wasn't true, but didn't press. When your child looks down out of shame, a mother often chooses to pretend not to see. I kept paying for electricity, water, health insurance, and sometimes slipped in extra for Ava's tuition. I told myself I could shoulder it, as long as they stayed afloat. By the fourth year, Brielle began setting rules. "Mom, no sweets for the kids at night." "Mom, the house needs to be spotless, guests are coming." "Mom, towels should be folded this way, not the old way." Each thing sounded small, but together they nicked like 1,000 paper cuts. I listened. I did. I swallowed it. Once, I made Arthur's favorite stew. The smell filled the kitchen. Mason breathed in deeply. "Man, it's been a while." Brielle frowned. "Red meat is full of cholesterol, Mason. You don't want to die young like your dad, do you?" The table fell silent. I looked down at my plate and murmured, "Your dad ate this up to 85 and was still healthy." She smirked. "Different times, Mom." After that dinner, I understood. In this house, I was no longer allowed to cook from memory. Mason wasn't heartless, just weak. When I said Brielle was going too far, he sighed. "She's under a lot of pressure, Mom. I'm gone all day, and she's home with 2 kids. And I'm taking care of the whole house." I wanted to say, but didn't. Sometimes I overheard Brielle on the phone with friends. "I'm living with my mother-in-law. It's so hard, she interferes in everything." Each time I wondered who she was talking about, because I hardly meddled in anything anymore. I just quietly cleaned, did laundry, and recorded expenses in a small notebook. I still remember a spring morning. I was hanging laundry in the backyard when I heard Brielle in the kitchen telling Mason, "Do you know how people see us? A married couple living off his old mother. I want a place of our own. But Mom pays the homeowner's insurance here. Selling's not that simple." Then have her sign the transfer. She doesn't need a big house anyway. I stood behind the curtain, heart pounding, not from fear but because I realized I'd given them too much. Piece by piece, until they believed everything they had was theirs by right. That summer I started journaling. Every night I opened an old leather notebook. The first line was always the same: day of patience. I didn't write much more, just small notes. Brielle nagged about towels. Mason forgot to pick up Ava. Micah was sick. I stayed up all night. Tiny, crooked lines like the trace of someone fading from her own life. Even so, one thing in me never went out: tenderness. I loved Mason, the boy who used to carry me, piggyback when my back hurt. I loved the two little ones, who laughed every time I baked cookies. I even loved Brielle, though she hurt me. Maybe because I believed people can change, that one day they'd understand I did everything out of love, but patience has limits. And what broke it wasn't a big fight, just a small thing so small that if I told it, people might think I was overreacting. Yet I remember that afternoon perfectly, sunlight slanting through the window, when Brielle said one sentence that completely shattered my endurance. Ava's 10th birthday came on a bright April day, the yard filled with azalea scent. I still remember her eyes when she pointed to the sign in the sporting goods store, a turquoise bicycle with a white wicker basket and shimmering streamers trailing in the wind. "Grandma, if I had that bike, I'd never be late for school again." She beamed. I smiled too, with a knot in my chest. I knew the price of that bike, $200, almost all of what was left of my pension after paying that month's bills. I hesitated many times, then still decided to buy it. I saved every spare coin, cut my spending for weeks, even gave up my favorite almond milk. She's only 10 once, I told myself. And sometimes one gift can make a childhood feel complete. 3 days before Ava's birthday, I quietly walked to the shop in town. The clerk, a curly-haired kid, helped me pick the exact turquoise bike she loved. I asked for silver wrapping paper with sunflowers printed on it, tied with a white bow. When the paper caught the sunlight, I smiled, picturing my granddaughter's shining face. I hid the bike in the garage and threw an old cloth over it. I couldn't sleep all night, replaying the moment Ava would see it. Arthur would have smiled if he were still here. He used to say, "Sometimes the smallest gift becomes the biggest memory." I wanted to give her a memory like that. On the morning of her birthday, I got up, earlier than usual. I made heart-shaped pancakes topped with strawberries and whipped cream. The kitchen smelled wonderful. I hung a few balloons by the window and set a vase of white roses in the center of the table. The house rarely felt that cheerful. I put on the old blue dress Arthur once complimented and felt a few years younger. Ava ran down the stairs, blonde pigtails bouncing, clapping and singing. "It's my birthday! Grandma, you remembered!" I opened my arms and hugged her. "Of course, sweetheart, I have a surprise for you." I hadn't finished the sentence when Brielle walked in wrinkled pajamas, hair pinned high. She looked around, frowning at the balloons and strawberries. "Mom, what is all this?" I said we didn't need to make a big deal. "It's just breakfast for Ava. It didn't cost much," I answered gently. She opened the fridge, poured a glass of orange juice, then turned back, voice syrupy. "You know, Mason and I already agreed this year we want to teach her about saving. No expensive gifts. We want her to understand the value of money." I looked at Ava and saw her smile dim. I tried to stay calm. "Don't worry, I only got a small present, nothing extravagant." Brielle raised an eyebrow. "Small, huh?" I smiled. "You'll see tonight." She stayed quiet, but her eyes were wary. I knew Brielle didn't like me doing anything that might make her look less in front of the kids. With her, everything I did had an angle. That afternoon, when Mason brought the kids home from school, I took out the garage key. "Ava, come here with Grandma," I called. She ran over, eyes lighting up as I pulled back the cloth to reveal the shimmering turquoise bike. "Oh my gosh, it's beautiful!" Ava gasped, almost breathless. "Is it really mine, Grandma?" I nodded. Happy birthday, my little angel. She threw her arms around me, laughing and crying at the same time. My heart melted with happiness. But the moment lasted only seconds. Brielle's voice cut in behind us, cold as steel. What is this? She came closer, eyes raking over the bike, then stared straight at me. I told you, Mom, no expensive gifts. I stayed calm. It's just a bike, Brielle. She's dreamed about it all year. That's not the point. The point is you're breaking our parenting rules. Rules? I repeated, with a small smile. I don't recall love having rules. She stepped in, voice low and sharp as a blade. You did this just to show the kids you're better than me, didn't you? Brielle, don't be ridiculous, Mason chimed in, but his voice was weak. I looked at her. I did it because I love my granddaughter, that's all. Ava gripped my hand, frightened by her parents arguing. Mom, please, I'll clean the bike myself. I won't ask for any more presents, she sobbed. But Brielle just sighed, then crouched to Ava's eye level. Sweetie, we just want you to learn to appreciate things. This bike isn't right. Grandma will return it, and then you'll understand why grown-ups have to save. No! Ava burst into tears. I held her, feeling her little heart thudding against my chest. That's enough, Brielle, I said, my voice tight. If you want to teach a lesson, use your own money, not her joy. She only pressed her lips together and pulled out her phone. Mom, return the bike, or I will. I'm not joking. That afternoon, I walked the bike back to the store, each step heavy as stone. The wind rustled through the trees, making the white bow flutter and whisper like Ava's laughter that morning. I took one last look before stepping inside and drew a deep breath. I'd like to return this bike, I told the curly-haired clerk. Are you sure, ma'am? It's our last one. Yes. The little girl changed her mind. When I signed the refund slip, my hand shook so much the ink smeared. I folded the receipt and tucked it into my wallet. As I left, a light rain started. Cold drops hit my cheeks, mixing with the salty taste at the corner of my mouth. That night, the house was quiet. No cake, no candles, just the TV murmuring in the living room. I set out the small cake. I'd already bought a simple vanilla butter cake on the kitchen table and placed the card I'd written, Happy Birthday, Ava, love you always. Grandma. Then I lit a tiny candle and watched it burn down, the flicker reflecting on Arthur's photo on the wall. Do you see this? I whispered. Our granddaughter isn't allowed to receive a bicycle because of a lesson on saving. I don't have enough say in my own house anymore. I stood, put on my coat, and stepped outside. The April night was colder than I expected. The corner store cast a dim yellow glow, the one where I usually bought milk. I had no plan, just knew I needed air. The shop was nearly empty. The owner, a familiar Italian gentleman, smiled. Cold night, Miss Lorraine. Still want coffee? I shook my head, then my eyes stopped at the lottery counter next to the register. A small sign read, Jackpot tomorrow night, $85 million. I gave a tired, wry smile. One ticket, please, with these numbers. I slowly read the familiar sequence. 10, 14, 21, 25, 30, 41, 47. Birthdays for Arthur, me, Mason, and the two kids. The numbers I'd played for 20 years, an old habit that never meant much. I pulled out a pen and signed the back. Lorraine Whitmore, Arthur's old rule, always sign and keep the receipt, Lorraine. People can argue plenty, but they can't fake a signature. I smiled at the owner, slid the ticket and receipt into my coat pocket. I could use a little luck tonight, he replied. Hope you get what you're wishing for. On the way home, I looked at the lit windows in the dark and wondered how many people inside were as tired as I was, still trying to believe in good, even when hurt by their own family. I wasn't hoping for wealth. I was asking for one simple thing, a way out. When I got home, I placed the ticket and receipt on the kitchen table, right where anyone could see, as if laying down a quiet prayer to the universe. Then I went up to the attic and listened to the rain tapping on the roof. The next morning, as the first light slipped through the window, I heard Betrayal shriek downstairs, her voice high with excitement. "Mason, wake up, now! We won!" Rushed footsteps, then a burst of laughter, quick kisses, a chair scraping. 85 million! Oh my God, we won 85 million! I sat up, heart pounding. I didn't need to look to know which ticket they were holding. I stepped onto the stairs and looked down at a scene both familiar and strange. Betrayal clinging to Mason, tears of joy, the ticket held high, the ticket I had bought. "I can't believe it. Who'd have thought just picked it up off the table and our lives changed?" Betrayal yelled, buzzing with excitement. "Maybe someone forgot it, but it's ours now." Mason laughed, hugging her tight. I stood still on the staircase. What started with a returned bicycle was turning into a storm I'd never imagined. I said nothing. I just watched the two people I'd supported for 7 years dancing around my kitchen as if fate had handed them a reward. I closed my eyes and told myself, "Stay quiet, Lorraine. Let them think they've won." I wanted to see how far their greed would take them and whether on that road they'd have enough conscience to realize the ticket was never theirs. 3 days after they won, the phone in my rented room rang off the hook at 7 a.m. I didn't pick up in time before it rang again, urgent, as if someone were racing the clock. "This is Grant Holloway, counsel for the Georgia State Lottery Commission," a calm baritone said. You need to verify a few details about the lottery ticket registered to Lorraine Whitmore. Is now a good time?" I paused, heart quickening. "Yes, I'm the one who bought that ticket." Papers rustled on his end. "We've matched the signature, serial number, and our system records. The ticket was registered under the name Lorraine Whitmore, former Savannah address, correct?" "Correct. Then congratulations, you're the grand prize winner. $85 million. I was quiet for a few seconds. Not because I was surprised, but because a strange feeling rose in me, not exactly joy, not shock, more like when a storm you saw from miles away finally arrives. "Mr. Holloway continued, his tone turning serious, "but I need you to be aware third parties have contacted the commission claiming to be the real owner of the ticket. A woman named Betrayal Carter Whitmore." I closed my eyes and smiled. "I'm guessing she didn't forget the hyphenated last name?" "Not at all," he said, a bit surprised at my composure. "She claims the ticket was bought with marital funds and that you, pardon my bluntness, are no longer competent to manage assets." I let out a small laugh, steady. "They haven't changed. When they can't take something, they try to convince others I'm not smart enough to keep it." I heard typing on his end. "Could you confirm a few items so we can protect your legal rights? The back signature, your ID number, and proof of purchase time?" I opened my wallet and pulled out the receipt I'd sealed between 2 laminates. "I have the receipt. Benny's Corner Mart. Purchase time, 7:43 p.m., Friday, April 12th. The serial number matches the ticket. I also have copies of my ID, and the store camera will show it." I spoke clearly, without a hint of hesitation. On the other end, Holloway's voice dropped, impressed. "Excellent. That's sufficient to affirm you as the lawful owner. However, I should warn you, these folks seem ready to cause trouble. They may push rumors that you're confused or even forge medical records." I sighed, but didn't waver. "Don't worry. I'm used to their labeling games. In my life, I've had many tags: weak, stubborn, old-fashioned. One more won't matter." A beat of silence, then he said slowly, "You're the calmest person I've ever told they've won $85 million. I gave a small smile. "Because to me, the real prize isn't the money, it's the truth." Before ending the call, he reminded me, "The claim window is 10 days from today. If you need it, we can arrange security or independent financial advisors." I thanked him, then said, "I'll make arrangements. But give me a few days, I want to see how far their performance goes. After the call, I sat still for a long time. Morning light slipped through the small window and washed over the peeling gray wall. I felt caught between two worlds. On one side, the shabby room that smelled like fryer oil. On the other, the people who'd just declared themselves millionaires with my money. I pulled out my old notebook and wrote a few lines. Day 1 after the win. I'm still poor, but richer than they are in one way. I still have my self-respect. I closed the notebook and dialed Penelope Banks, my neighbor of 30 years. Penelope's the kind of woman everyone respects. Serious, fair, and allergic to show-offs. Lorraine, good Lord, where are you? The whole neighborhood's talking about your lottery win. I knocked a few times and only saw your daughter-in-law, she said you went on. Vacation? I laughed. Yeah, I'm on vacation somewhere with no air conditioning, no people, and a smell of grease in my hair. What on earth? Pen, I need a favor. I kept it short. Watch the house for a few days. Note dates, plates, what cars show up. I want to see how fast they burn through cash. Penelope. I was quiet a few seconds, then asked softly, What are you going to do, Lorraine? I'm not going to do anything, I said lightly. I just want the truth to surface at the right time, in the right place. In the afternoon, I stopped by First Southern Bank and opened a small safe deposit box. The young teller asked, What will you be storing, ma'am? My future, I said, placing inside the original receipt, a photocopy of the ticket, and copies of my ID. I kept scans and a few photos on my phone. I've learned that sometimes justice needs to be kept in more than one drawer. As I left the bank, I caught my reflection in the glass, an older woman with silver hair, a gray cardigan, and an oddly steady gaze. Arthur used to tell me, You're gentle, but when pushed, you turn into ice. Today, I understood he was right. I walked back and stopped at a sidewalk cafe. It was small, with just a few people reading the paper. I ordered a hot black coffee, pulled out my notebook and began to write, Saturday, 10 They still think I'm weak. They don't know the ticket has already spoken for me. I'm not running, I'm preparing. Every lie is a trap, and all I have to do is wait for the snap. That evening, when the city lights came on, I got the first text from Mason. Mom, we want to talk. Brielle is stressed, don't believe what the papers are saying. The papers? I opened my phone, and sure enough, a local site had posted, Savannah couple wins jackpot. Elderly mother gifts ticket to her son, then disappears. I laughed out loud. Even their lies were clumsy, I murmured. Congratulations, Brielle. You just publicly admitted I bought the ticket. I texted Mason back. Don't worry, I'm not missing. I'm just seeing clearly who's genuine and who isn't. Then I turned off my phone and lay back on the bed. Rain ticked against the window. I didn't know where they were, maybe touring mansions, maybe ordering a new car, maybe planning a new millionaire party, but I knew one thing, the rules had changed. From the moment the signature Lorraine Whitmore appeared on the back of the ticket, they could lie, they could threaten, but they couldn't erase the truth. I put my hand on the notebook and wrote one last line before turning out the light. Tomorrow, when they buy more cars, more dresses, more lies, I'll just smile. Because this game isn't about money. It's about character. I used to think greed only shows when people are desperate. Turns out, it grows even bigger when they get something they never deserved. Just 3 days after the win, Brielle started performing like a star. She made a new social media account called The Lucky Whitmore. On flashy live streams, she wore an ivory silk dress, held a glass of wine, and smiled sweet as sugar. Life can be very fair, she told thousands of viewers. If you do the right thing, the universe will send a reward. I watched that video on my old phone in the rented room, half amused and half heartsick. Because in that line about the universe rewarding people who do the right thing, Brielle was implying I was the opposite, an old, senile freeloader living off her kids. On her live stream, she said, "My mother-in-law once promised to gift the ticket to the family, and we didn't want to accept it, but she insisted." Every line was crafted to sound grateful while planting doubt. I read the comments below. "So lucky to have such a generous mother-in-law. She must really love her daughter-in-law." And one that stung my eyes. "Hope the old lady doesn't try to take back what she gave." They didn't know. They hadn't seen Brielle's real face. But they would. That morning, Penelope called. "Lorraine, you won't believe it. The whole neighborhood is buzzing about your house. Furniture trucks, flower deliveries, even a brand new SUV parked right out front. The dealer's sticker's still on." I chuckled. "I believe it, Pen. I even know the color black with a silver sheen. Sporty model, right?" She burst out laughing. "Exactly." "You're psychic. No need to guess, Pen. With Brielle, the bigger the better, as long as someone is watching." At noon, Penelope sent photos. Brielle posing at the front door, holding a bouquet of white roses, next to a sign that read, "The Whitmore Residence." Mason forced a smile beside her, while the two kids were dressed in matching white outfits more like ad models than children. White roses. Arthur used to say, "Nothing is emptier than a white rose beautiful, but no scent." I've never heard a truer line. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Brielle. Her voice was candy sweet, nothing like the tone of someone who'd thrown me out of my own house. "Miss Lorraine, I just want a gentle chat." "We're family, right?" I stayed silent. "About the ticket," she went on. "There's probably a small mix-up. I just need you to sign a brief confirmation that it isn't yours. It's only to help the bank process things faster." I gave a small laugh. "Brielle, when did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" Lorraine's question may sound gentle, but it's stronger than any revenge. If you've ever been misunderstood or looked down on like she was, would you stay silent or speak up like that? Share how you feel below. Sometimes one honest comment is enough to give strength to someone going through the same thing. Dead silence on the other end. The pause stretched so long I could hear her breathing quicken. Then she changed the subject. "People online are saying you're not in a stable situation. I'm just worried someone might take advantage of you." I cut in. "Thanks for the concern. But the only person who's ever taken advantage of me is the one on this call." I hung up, and when I looked out the window, rain began to fall, each drop tapping the foggy glass like a signal that a storm was coming. The next night, an email came from Attorney Holloway. "Miss Lorraine, we just received a letter from the law office of Carter Whitmore Family Holdings. It alleges you lack the financial and mental capacity to manage assets and requests that financial guardianship be transferred to your son, Mason Whitmore." I wasn't surprised. I knew Brielle would play this card, attacking with the senile mother image she'd seeded in public. "Still," I asked, "what do you think, Holloway?" He gave a short, wry laugh. "I think it's a bad play. They don't understand the law. Your signature, the original receipt, the purchase data, they're all solid. If they push this, they'll cause trouble for themselves." "Then let them keep going," I said. "The farther they walk, the more footprints they leave." The next day, Penelope called again, voice lowered to a near whisper. "Lorraine, I've heard them arguing all afternoon." Mason yelled, "Stop it, this is my mother!" And Brielle screamed, "No way! If you don't take my side, you lose everything!" I closed my eyes. Mason's image flashed in my mind, the little boy who once pedaled his bike around the yard, who promised, "I'll protect you forever, Mom." Now he was stuck between his mother and a wife, draining his soul. I didn't blame him. I was just sad. Sometimes love can make people blind. I lit a small candle and placed it by Arthur's photo on the table. The light washed over his gentle, steady face, just like before. "Do you see this, Arthur?" I whispered. "I did what you asked. I'm not bowing my head anymore. I'll stand tall, even if I'm standing alone." I sat a long time watching the flame tremble. Every time a draft slipped through the doorframe, the flame wavered but didn't go out. In it, I saw myself maybe shaky, but still shining. I opened my notebook and wrote a new page. Already spent it, Mom. Deposits on 2 cars, down payment on a mansion on Tybee Island, signed a furniture contract, even paid for a Europe trip. All from a pending funds account. They said the money would arrive soon. I sat on the old plastic chair and listened, each word cutting like a blade. "So," I asked quietly, "you spent money you didn't have?" Mason was silent. I thought he'd make excuses, but he didn't. Just a sigh and a faint rustle, like he was raking his hand through his hair. I closed my eyes. "Mason, for 7 years, who paid the electric bill, the water, the insurance, the kids' schooling?" No answer. I repeated, slower. "Who, Mason?" After a heavy few seconds, he said softly, "You did." "Right," I said. "Me. The person you said was living off you. The one thrown out of her own house. The one labeled, 'not competent,' and now you're calling to ask if the ticket is mine." Mason's voice shook. I didn't know Betrayal would do that." She said, "She thought you wouldn't take it back." I gave a small, bitter laugh. "She doesn't understand me, Mason. I can forgive being poor. I can't forgive deception." I paused, then said slowly, "You want to talk? Fine. Come to where I am. Today, 2 p.m. Mason was quiet. I heard an engine start on his end. "Mom, I'll come." "Good," I said, "but bring the truth. No gifts, no excuses. Just the truth." After the call, I looked around my little room, not fancy, not tidy, but the only place still mine. The peeling wooden table, the old beige curtain, the slightly crooked plastic chair where I wrote every night. I wiped the dust off the chair, steadied its legs, then opened the window to let in the morning air with its mix of fryer oil and coffee from the restaurant downstairs. That smell used to bother me, but today it made me feel alive, like I'd stepped back into a real rhythm of living, no longer faking niceness to keep anyone happy. Before the meeting time, the phone rang again. It was Attorney Halloway. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I've secured an identity verification and prize claim slot for you. 3 p.m. tomorrow at the main office. Please arrive 15 minutes early." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you, Grant. This is almost over. Do you want us to alert the press? In cases like yours, the media is very interested," I answered. "Not yet. I want a few people to know the truth before the world does." After the call, I brewed a pot of peppermint tea. The fresh scent filled the room, blending with the soft noon light. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote one more line. "Monday, 6:45. My son asked, 'Did you buy the ticket?' I answered, 'Yes.' Maybe this morning, for the first time in 7 years, he heard his mother's real voice. I closed the notebook and set it beside the cup. On the wall, an old family photo hung slightly crooked. In it, me, Arthur, and 5-year-old Mason stood in front of the first house we bought. Sunlight lit our faces bright and peaceful. I touched the faded frame. "Arthur," I whispered, "if you were here, what would you do? Would you forgive him?" I answered myself in silence. "Maybe you would. I won't." I poured more water into the pot, and the steam fogged the window. Each bead on the glass reflected a memory. Mason's first day of school and the lunch I packed. Arthur laughing, saying the boy looked just like him. Then the funeral, the driving rain, and me standing alone as the casket was lowered. That day I promised to protect our son at all costs. But it turns out, sometimes protecting means letting him face his own mistakes. It wasn't even 2 o'clock yet, but I was ready. I set the table, arranged 2 cups of tea and a small plate of cookies. Nothing fancy, just my habit. Older folks like me tend to make things comfortable before serious conversations. I threw the window wide so the light would fall across the tablecloth and make the room feel less gloomy. Outside, traffic was picking up. I heard kids laughing on the street and an older lady greeting customers at the cafe across the way. Life went on as usual, while I was getting ready for the most important confrontation of my life, not in a courtroom, but with the son I brought into this world. I looked at the clock, 1:47. It wasn't time yet, but my heart was beating harder, not from fear but from keeping myself steady. I wanted Mason to see clearly. His mother is not the weak, confused woman Betrayal painted me to be. I wanted every word I said to carry the weight of a truth they had tried to bury. A breeze moved through, carrying the scent of mint out to the porch. I sat down, placed my hand on my notebook, and told myself, if you choose conscience, I'll save you. If you choose silence, let the law do the rest. I turned the teacup slightly and watched the little circles ripple across the surface, each ring a symbol of 7 years of pressure, 7 years of endurance, 7 years of unconditional love. Now each ring was fading into the next, leaving the surface still like my heart before the storm. 1 more hour, and Mason would walk through that door. I told myself, this time, you won't only meet your mother, you'll meet the woman you and your wife woke up, the woman you should never have underestimated. I took the first sip of tea, the warmth sliding down my throat. Sunlight tilted across the old wall, leaving a soft band of light like a promise. Outside, a light breeze brushed the window frame, and the wind chime gave a gentle ring. I looked at the empty chair across from me and said out loud, "Son, I'm waiting." A knock sounded right at 2 p.m. Not early, not late. I stood, feeling not nervous but oddly as if I were about to preside over a hearing. The door opened. Mason stood there, pale, hair mussed, eyes sunken. He glanced around the shabby room, the stained ceiling, the lopsided single bed, the damp in the corner, then looked back at me, voice tight. "I'm sorry, Mom." Just 4 words. But I knew he'd crossed a long night to say them. I didn't answer, just motioned to the chair I'd wiped down that morning. "Sit, Mason. This room isn't pretty, but at least it's mine." He lowered his head, avoiding my eyes. The dim light through the window cast our silhouettes across the blotchy wall, 2 figures close, yet far. Not 5 minutes later, Betrayal showed up. Her heels struck sharp on the concrete. A sweet, biting perfume swamped the lingering fryer smell from downstairs. She swept in, scanned the room, and smirked. "Cozy, isn't it?" I calmly set my cup down. "It's warm because there are no lies in here, Betrayal." She shrugged, perched on the edge of the bed, and pulled out her phone like she was at some fancy meeting. Mason looked from her to me, awkward. I decided not to drag out the pretending. "I'll be brief," I said. "This morning, the lottery's attorney confirmed it. The name on the ticket is Lorraine Whitmore. The payout account is set. The money will hit within 24 hours. The room went still. Mason swallowed. After a few seconds, Betrayal gave a thin laugh. "So you plan to keep it all?" I met her eyes. "I plan to keep what's mine." Mason lifted a hand. "Mom, I didn't come to fight. I just thought maybe we could make a deal. Like a family agreement so no one has to go to court." I smiled slightly, sorrow from 7 buried years behind it. "A deal? Mason, I've been making deals for 7 years. I dealt by staying silent when I was insulted. I dealt by paying the power bill when you were unemployed. I dealt by babysitting all day while your wife called me a freeloader. And the final deal, letting you throw my things out the window and saying nothing." Mason stared at his lap. Betrayal sat straight, expression flat. She gave a light, scripted chuckle. "You misunderstand. I just think if we cooperate, everyone wins. We could buy a big house, you could live with us, have your own private suite, your own little kitchen, your own bath, every comfort." I lifted my head, voice cold as steel. "A private suite? In your estate?" "That's right," Betrayal said quickly, thinking I'd softened. "Quiet, airy, private, just for you." I looked at her, letting my eyes settle on that fake smile. Sounds more like a dog kennel out back than a mother's room. She froze, color draining. Mason started to speak, but I raised a hand. Before we talk cooperation, I need answers, short ones. I opened a drawer and took out a folded paper, the expense log I'd kept for 7 years. I laid it on the table. First question, I said, eyes on Betrayal. Who threw my things out the window that morning? She rolled her eyes. You know, I just lost my temper a little. So you admit it, I cut in. Second question, who called me a freeloader, a useless hanger-on? She gave a bitter smile. What do you want, an apology? I want the truth, and if you need a refresher, Mason was standing right there. He can confirm. Mason drew a breath, voice shaking. Mom, yes, Betrayal said it. I heard everything. Betrayal snapped toward him, eyes blazing. What are you doing? I'm telling the truth, Mason said, and for the first time in years, there was a little courage in his tone. The tiny room felt tight as a wire. Betrayal's hands were clenched white. I went on, quiet but clear. Thank you, Mason. You finally said what you should have said 7 years ago. I unfolded the paper and read, careful, line by line. Electric bill, $118 a month, 7 years. Water, about $42. Roof repair in 2018, $1,400. Ava and Micah's school costs, a total of $18,600. Groceries, medicine, household goods, can't even count. I folded the paper and set it down, all from my pension. I'm not saying this to collect, I'm reminding you these numbers are evidence of kindness, not obligation. With no way to dodge, Betrayal started to fray. You think you're a saint? You give and now you're keeping score? If you don't sign a transfer, I'll sue you for asset fraud. Mason flinched. Betrayal, stop. But I was already on my feet, calmer than even I expected. I pointed to the door, still slightly open. You're free to leave, Betrayal. No threats, no theater. The court isn't far, life will teach you for me. She shot up, eyes burning. You'll regret this. I cut in. No, you will. When you learn money can't buy 1 second of peace, when the kids start asking why grandma isn't home anymore, when your husband stops bowing his head, then you'll know who's truly pitiable. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her face went from red to white. Then, without a word, she turned, heels hammering the floor, and the door slammed like a gavel. Silence again, just me and Mason. He bowed his head low. Mom, I don't know what to say. I let it go too far. I looked at my son, his face gaunt, but for the first time in years, his eyes held a little honesty. Just remember, I said, low but gentle, every mistake has a price. The only price I want from you is the truth. He nodded, eyes wet. Can you forgive me? I sighed softly. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Mason. It's remembering and choosing not to take revenge. I stood and set a hand on his shoulder. Now go, take care of the kids. Tomorrow I'll claim the money. After that, we'll talk again. If you still want a mother. Mason squeezed my hand, then left. When the door clicked shut, the room fell, quiet. I sat and looked at the 2 teacups, one still warm, one gone cold. I knew the line between us was like those 2 cups. Once the same fragrance, no longer the same moment. I lit another candle and wrote in my notebook, this afternoon the rented room became a courtroom. No judge, no jury, just conscience. That evening, Mason came back. Betrayal wasn't with him. It was just him, wrinkled shirt, eyes red from no sleep. I was in the same spot, the little wooden table with 2 cups of tea, as if time hadn't moved since the stormy afternoon. He stood at the door, unsure where to begin. I motioned for him to sit and said softly, You don't need to explain anymore, Mason. I understand. Now I want to talk about the future and the conditions for it to exist. He nodded, hands clenched until the knuckles went white. I poured tea and slid the cup toward him. I will help you, I began, but not for you, for Ava and Micah. He looked up, hope and shame mixed in his eyes. I spoke slowly, each word clear. You put deposits on cars, a house, and silly luxuries I never needed. I can cover those, consider it protecting the kids from the financial chaos their parents created. Mason started to thank me, but I held up a hand. Don't thank me yet. I said I'd help, not forgive. Every bit of help comes with conditions, and you need to understand forgiveness is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. I met his eyes, my voice dropping. First condition. You end this toxic marriage. No half measures, no stalling. If you let Betrayal drag you down, I'll pull all support. I won't bankroll anyone who chooses to live in the mud. Mason went still. I saw his shoulders tremble, but he didn't object. Second condition, I continued, you apologize publicly right on the front steps, in front of the neighbors who watched you let your wife humiliate me. Not to make me feel good, but to make you learn responsibility through action, not tears. I paused, took a sip, then said the last part, the hardest for him. Third condition, you go to counseling for single fathers. Not because I think you're weak, but because you need to relearn how to be a dad. Ava and Micah deserve a decent example, not a husband who stays silent when their mother is insulted. The air felt thick. Mason didn't speak for a full minute. Then he exhaled, voice small, as if afraid to wake someone. What about Betrayal? I looked toward the window, the streetlights reflected on the glass, throwing a cold gold into the room. She'll do what people like her always do, scream, blame, threaten, and I'll let her. But if she wants a fight, I'm ready. As if on cue, a hard, rapid knock hit the door. I didn't need to guess who it was. The door swung open and Betrayal walked in, still beautiful but with clouded eyes. Arms folded, she let out a razor-edged laugh. Perfect. Mommy and son plotting again? Mason stood. Betrayal, I told you to stay home. At home so you can let her brainwash you? She turned to me, a curled, contemptuous smile. What are you doing teaching him conscience? Or is this emotional blackmail? I stayed calm, letting none of her noise stir me. I'm setting the terms for forgiveness, Betrayal. And you, sadly, aren't on the list. Oh, really? She arched a brow, voice sharper. You think you can control my husband forever? I'll take full custody and half the assets. I have legal rights and I know the law. I gave a small smile and answered evenly, no louder than conversation. Then sue, Betrayal. But remember, don't use my money to hire your lawyer. Silence stretched. In her eyes, I caught a flicker of confusion, maybe the first time she'd met someone who wasn't afraid. Mason turned, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, voice rough, Mom, I choose you, and the kids. I didn't hug him or say more. I just nodded. Arthur's old words rang in my head. A man grows up when he faces consequences. Mason had stepped over that line, and I would let him walk it himself. Betrayal looked at her husband, eyes rimmed red. You'll regret this. Mason didn't answer. His silence was the reply she refused to accept. She yanked the door, the metal clanging against the wall. I won't let this go! You'll lose everything! Her voice cracked, split between hate and fear. I just watched her go and said, my voice low, No, Betrayal. You're the one who's losing because you've thrown away the one thing money can't buy. Respect, she snapped. We'll see you in court. I'm not afraid. I smiled, light as a breeze. Good, because this time, the court won't just ask who's right, it'll ask who forgot how to be human. Betrayal spun on her heel. Her high heels hammered the metal stairs, echoing beat by beat like a countdown to an oncoming legal storm. I sat still and listened until the sound faded, leaving only silence. Mason collapsed into the chair, head in his hands. I don't even know where to start. Start by keeping your word, I said. Tomorrow, go apologize to Penelope and the neighbors who saw everything. Tell it all. No excuses. And from now on, you'll pay your own rent, your own tuition, every last bill. I can help, but I won't bankroll you anymore." He nodded. In those red-rimmed eyes, I saw a faint light, not the glow of someone forgiven, but of someone beginning to understand what starting over means. I stood and refilled his tea. "Drink it, so you remember the taste of truth. Bitter at first, clean after." Mason took a small sip and gave a tiny nod. "I understand, Mom." Softly, I answered, "No, Mason, you're learning to understand." When he left, Savannah's night sank into a heavy mist. I stood at the window and watched his headlights disappear around the corner. On the table, my notebook lay open to a page half written. I picked up my pen and added, "Tonight, my son chose what's right over what's easy. Forgiveness comes with terms because love isn't a servant. The clack of a liar's heels travels far, but in the end, silence wins." I set the pen down and blew out the candle. In the dark, only the streetlight framed the window and threw back my face tired, but at peace. Tomorrow, the legal fight would begin. But this time, I wouldn't be alone. The next afternoon, the sun finally broke through Savannah after days of gloom. Light glittered off rain-wet leaves like tinsel. I put on a beige cardigan and picked up my small bag. Inside were the folded lottery ticket, the receipt copy, and my ID, everything I'd prepared the night before. Attorney Grant Holloway arrived right on time. He opened the car door, as courteous as ever. "Ready, Lorraine?" I smiled. "I've been ready for 7 years, Grant. Today I'm just reclaiming what's fair." We reached the Georgia Lottery office at 3:15 p.m. The headquarters stood in a sleek glass building, sky-blue reflections running across it. As we walked through the entrance, the soft click of the automatic door sounded ordinary, but to me, it was a lock opening on a brand new chapter. Inside, a staffer led us to a verification room. A middle-aged woman in a gray suit came out to greet us, introducing herself as the Special Prize Records Manager. "Are you the owner of the winning ticket number 78 Amperes 4539? "Yes," I said, taking the ticket from its plastic sleeve and laying it gently on the table. Gloved, she inspected it under a special light, matched the signature and serial number, then pulled up security footage from Benny's Corner Mart, the store where I'd bought the ticket on Ava's birthday. The screen showed a silver-haired woman in a brown coat signing the back of the ticket. No zoom needed, I knew it was me. Holloway nodded at me. The staffer said, "The signature is a complete match. The ticket is valid. We'll seal and process the payout today." I exhaled, not in relief, but release. After verification, they presented payout options. I studied the list and said clearly, "I'd like an initial portion now, enough to cover immediate needs. The remainder goes into a trust named the Arthur and Lorraine Whitmore Trust." The staffer looked a bit surprised. "You want to set up a trust right now?" "Yes. I lost an honest husband and gave my life to our family. This trust is how I keep the cleanest part of that life intact." Holloway smiled. "I'll finalize the trust paperwork today. It'll be a private trust, no public names, no media access." I nodded. "Exactly. I've had enough noise. I want quiet, not spotlights." When everything was done, Holloway set the packet on the table. "Do you want me to submit Miss Penelope Banks's statement as well? I've got her handwritten account detailing how Betrayal and Mason started spending before any funds actually arrived." I gave a small smile. "Yes. Not just for me, but for the truth. I want the record to show that kindness isn't stupidity." Holloway filed the full-set statement, receipts, video proof, and bank confirmations. The manager reviewed, signed, and sealed. "Congratulations, Miss Whitmore," she said warmly. "One last step. The first transfer will be made within 48 hours. The trust will go active upon approval." I held the receipt and read the printed line, "Recipient, Lorraine Whitmore." One sheet, 12 letters, but proof of honor for a woman once called a freeloader. On the drive back, Holloway asked, "Any plans for the first disbursement?" "I want to open a separate education trust for the kids, Ava and Micah." "Good," he said. "I can help you set binding terms." "I only have one requirement," I said. "They can access it at 18 with proof of schooling. No one Mason included withdraws early. No adult touches that money, not even me." Holloway studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You know, Lorraine, very few big winners think that far ahead. Most only think about spending." I smiled. "I've lived long enough to know money only matters when it stays where it should." That evening, I signed a lease for a small house near Seabrook Bay. It was quiet, with a front porch facing the water and a little garden. I put down a deposit to redo the kitchen and asked for a trellis of climbing roses, the kind Arthur once tended at the old place. The contractor asked, "What color?" "Velvety red, summer bloomers with a strong scent," I said. "I want to open the door each morning and remember him not with tears, but with fragrance." I paid, then left the rental office. Driving past the bay, the water caught the orange of the setting Sunday. For a moment I saw myself a woman once thrown out of her home walking down the road of her own freedom. Night fell. I went back to the old room to finish packing. My phone pinged an email from Betrayal. Subject: Legal notice and health warning. I opened it. A long paragraph and an attachment, a medical report forged in my name, claiming I had significant memory impairment and lacked the capacity to manage finances. She still didn't understand the game was over. I forwarded it to Holloway. In under 5 minutes, he called. "Lorraine, she's just made a serious mistake. That's defamation with fabricated documents. I'll send a formal cease and desist and put her on notice if she continues. We'll sue under Section 16 of the Freedom of Information and Reputation Protection Act." Quietly, I said, "Grant, see? People only lie when they're afraid of the truth." He chuckled. "You're right. But now the law's on your side. Let me handle the rest." I nodded and closed my phone. A sea breeze slipped through the cracked window, salt soft. I sat on the bed, shoulders, finally, loosening after months clenched tight. I thought about tomorrow, the day I'd officially be the winner of $85 million, but that no longer moved me. What soothed me most was proving I'm not crazy, not weak, and don't need anyone to define my worth. I looked at Arthur's photo on the table, his eyes as kind and deep as ever. "See, love," I whispered. "I did it. I kept signing my own name just like you told me." I lay down and let the night wind play with the curtain. For the first time in years, I slept deep, no screaming, no slamming doors, no shattering things. Only the far-off sound of waves and a peace like old arms around me. Tonight, I stopped running from fear because it turned into evidence of resolve. May brought Savannah's damp winds. Mornings draped the city in a thin, cold veil. On one such morning, I got the court notice. Brielle Carter Whitmore had officially filed suit. The cause, as stated, was seeking custody and determination of the legal guardian for minors Ava and Micah. The complaint was nearly 100 pages. She accused me of manipulating Mason with lottery winnings, psychologically influencing him to break up the family, and lacking the capacity to control a large asset, creating a risk of financial abuse. I read every line, half laughing, half sighing. She still wouldn't stop. Instead of bowing her head and making amends, Brielle chose a loser's favorite lane-swapping victim and culprit. Holloway lifted the file and raised an eyebrow. "She's forgotten she's leaving a trail. This suit won't just fail, it'll expose her completely." I nodded. "I don't need a flashy win, Grant. I just want everything seen in the light." 2 weeks later, the first hearing opened. The judge was Meredith Shaw, a woman in her 50s with a sharp eye and an even voice. When I entered, she looked at me not with pity, but with the quiet respect reserved for someone who has endured too much. Brielle sat across the aisle in a pristine white dress, perfect hair, carefully done makeup. She held Mason's hand, but his eyes were cast down. I knew that grip wasn't love anymore, it was a shackle. Judge Shaw started with assessments of living conditions. The social worker reported, "Miss Whitmore's former rented room is recorded as neat and safe, though modest. The new Seabrook house has been inspected clean, comfortable, suitable for an older adult with space for children. Mr. Mason Whitmore's home is currently well maintained, with a stable plan for both children. By contrast, Miss Brielle Carter Whitmore's residence is under an unpaid mortgage and has a history of noise and disturbance complaints." Brielle tried to cut in, voice shooting high. "I only work from home. And he can't raise the kids alone." Judge Shaw raised a hand. "You'll have your turn." Next came the witnesses. Penelope Banks took the stand with a frayed little notebook. She recounted hearing Brielle insult me, the nights I quietly hauled trash, the bills I paid. When the judge asked why she remembered so clearly, Penelope said, "Because I watched a woman hold a family together with kindness and get pushed out the door by the same people." Then, 2 other neighbors spoke, followed by the corner store manager who confirmed I bought the ticket, signed it, and kept the receipt. Finally, Holloway played video from Penelope's porch camera Brielle, throwing my things out the window to the shout of, "Go die in a nursing home." The courtroom went silent. Brielle bowed her head. Mason trembled, tears streaming. Judge Shaw tapped the gavel softly, voice steady. "Miss Carter Whitmore, the court has reviewed this. Verbal abuse, control, and defamation of an elder without physical violence still constitutes serious psychological abuse." Brielle burst into tears. I was just stressed. Stress does not excuse humiliation," the judge said, firm. When it was Mason's turn, I didn't look at my son. I just listened. He laid out a plan for single fatherhood, Ava and Micah's school schedules, a detailed budget, proof he'd enrolled in parenting counseling. The judge asked, "Do you have the financial ability to care for both children?" Mason answered, "Yes, Your Honor, I'm back to full-time work. My mother set up an education trust for the kids, but she doesn't interfere in my personal life." That sentence made me relax my shoulders a little. After all these years, he finally knew how to say something honest without dodging it. When it was my turn, the judge asked, "Miss Lorraine, do you have anything to say about custody?" I stood, looked around the room, and said slowly, "I'm not here to win or lose. I just want my 2 grandkids to be safe and grow up in a home without fear. Whichever side can give them that, that's the side I'll support." The courtroom went silent. The judge nodded, her eyes softening. After 2 days of hearings, the ruling was announced. The court granted primary custody to Mason and gave Brielle supervised visitation. She was required to attend a 6-month counseling program on behavioral control and family communication. As for the suit over claiming the lottery prize, the judge dismissed it entirely and formally reprimanded Brielle for deliberate defamation and manipulation of medical information. Judge Shaw read the final lines of the decision, firm and clear. The court recognizes Miss Lorraine Whitmore as the legal owner of the winning ticket and as a victim of defamation. Truth does not need a defender, it only needs time. And time has done its work. Brielle bowed her head, gripping the chair, face white as paper. Mason said nothing. He just held my hand tight, the grip I'd waited 7 years to feel. When we stepped out of the courthouse, wind from Seabrook Bay blew hard, bringing the ocean's salt and a cool mist. My silver hair flew wild, but I didn't smooth it down. For the first time in my life, I let the wind do what it wanted as a sign of freedom. Holloway walked beside me, smiling. "You just won 2 cases at once, Lorraine. People are going to write about this." I smiled. "That's all right." I asked for anonymity. "I don't need anyone to know I won, I just need the kids to know truth won." Penelope came running from a distance and hugged me tight. "Told you, Justice may arrive late, but it never loses its way. I laughed and looked out at the bay. Thanks, Pen. I just want to go home and plant roses. The trellis is waiting. Mason stood next to me and said softly, Mom, I want to move to Seabrook, not into your house, but nearby. So Ava and Micah can run over to see you anytime. I nodded without saying more. A tear slipped from the corner of my eye, not from sadness but from release. That night, I sat on the porch of my new home, looking out at water gleaming in the moonlight. Waves tapped the shore in steady beats like my own heartbeat. No more anger, no more resentment. I opened my notebook and wrote the final lines for the longest day of my life. Today, the court didn't just rule on Betrayal, it ruled on my 7 years of silence. The price of deceit is losing trust. The reward for resolve is peace. The bay wind ran through my hair, salty and light. I looked up and saw a single star break through the gray. Softly, as if to Arthur, I said, See? In the end, justice found its way home. I moved into the little house in Seabrook on a gentle morning in early June. The sea was pale blue, the waves calm, and the kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon under fresh paint. I chose cream walls and set lavender pots by the window so every morning I could sip tea and watch silver waves hit the rocks. The house was small but enough for one person. A bright living room, a warm kitchen, a bedroom facing the bay. I rehung the old photos, Arthur's kind smile, little Mason with a kite, Ava and Micah in my lap when they were tiny. Each picture felt like a stitch pulling the torn pieces of memory back together. On the first day, Mason called. Mom, can I bring the kids over this weekend? I smiled. The door's always open, but bring your dad's chowder recipe. Saturday afternoon, with gold light pouring over the bay, Mason drove up. Ava and Micah leapt from the car, their laughter ringing across the yard. I don't know how long I'd been smiling, only that a simple, complete feeling filled me. Family, without the heaviness. Mason rolled up his sleeves in the kitchen. I watched him clumsily chop onions and taste the soup, and I thought of Arthur, so patient, teaching his son every step. Mom, I don't remember the exact amounts of milk and cream, Mason said, sweat beading on his forehead. I answered, Arthur never measured. He cooked by feel and by love. We made the first chowder in the new kitchen. As the smell of corn, cream, and pepper drifted through the house, I realized some scents never die, they just sleep until your heart is ready to wake them. After dinner, I took Ava outside. She wore a pale blue dress, cheeks pink from the sundae. I opened a small box and brought out the turquoise bicycle, the dream left unfinished years ago. Ava squealed, Grandma, really? This is for me? I nodded, eyes stinging. Yes, for you. But there's a condition: you have to keep a promise. What promise? Never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve good things. She hugged me, then hopped on and pedaled around the yard. Her laughter rang all afternoon like a bell washing the old bitterness clean. Meanwhile, Micah sat in the living room, carefully building with Legos on the wooden table Arthur once sanded by hand. Each time he finished a model, he ran to show me. Look, Grandma, I matched the picture. I patted his head and thought, Arthur, do you see? The kids still have your skillful hands. A few weeks later, Mason started a support group for single dads. I didn't push, just encouraged. Most evenings after, he'd share, they're teaching me how to set boundaries, how to say no without guilt, and how to say yes when it's about responsibility. I smiled. You're learning what your father taught his whole life. Being a good man doesn't require shouting, just knowing right from wrong. Mason changed slowly. The tightness left his face. When he came to pick up the kids, he'd say, Don't let Grandma lift heavy things, clean up after dinner. I didn't step into his personal life anymore. I loved my son, but I'd learned to love with limits. I also set clear financial boundaries. I said plainly, any help from me, tuition, counseling, childcare needs receipts, a purpose, and a clear commitment. I won't use money to patch over mistakes anymore. Mason understood. He nodded without pride. At last he'd grown up. In the fall, I started a small project, Hands for Home, a program helping older adults who are exploited or abandoned by family find temporary housing. The idea came one night after reading a letter from a woman in another state whose son had taken her pension. I invited Penelope to join. She was so excited she showed up the next morning with a box of paint and brushes. Where do we begin, Lorraine? We repainted an old dining table she donated. The new coat covered the scratches, looking worn yet warm. I said, "This table will be the first place where anyone can sit and eat without being insulted." She laughed. "Sounds like our table, just a little bigger." When the paint dried, we centered it in the living room and set a velvet red rose arrangement, Arthur's favorite. That table later became our weekend gathering spot, where I heard my grandkids laugh, Mason talk, kitchen tricks, and Penelope chat about the neighbors. One evening, when the house was quiet, I sat to write. In front of me, a blank page. Beside me, the old fountain pen Arthur used for his first contract. I wrote a letter to myself. Lorraine, forgiveness doesn't mean erasing. It means moving on without letting the past trip you. People can change, but not everyone deserves to come close again. Your son is learning to be a father. You are learning to be yourself again. I folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer addressed to the woman in the mirror who made it through the storm without breaking. Night fell, and sea air swept across the porch, carrying salt and roses. I went to the garden, cut a red bloom, and brought it inside. On the shelf, Arthur's photo still smiled the same. I set the rose before the frame and whispered, "I put myself first, Arthur, just like you told me, and I kept my word." I sat quietly, listening to the waves. Each one said what I needed to hear. Sometimes healing isn't going back. It's standing together with clear boundaries. I smiled and blew out the candle. The light faded, leaving only cinnamon in the air and the steady hush of the sea, the final lullaby for a woman who found peace, not in others, but in herself. That afternoon, a sudden downpour hammered the porch roof, knocking at memory like a steady drum. I was brewing mint tea when I heard a sound at the gate. Opening the door, I saw Betrayal holding a frayed umbrella, eyes bruised with exhaustion, the confidence gone from her hollow face. "What do you need, Betrayal?" I asked, calm. She hesitated, then said quietly, almost a whisper, "I need help." I invited her onto the porch but kept the door pulled to. Boundaries aren't just a latch, they're a choice. Rain ran off the roof and streaked the concrete. She sat on the wooden chair Penelope had painted, hands trembling in her lap. "Creditors are after me," she said finally. "I lost my job at the firm. I don't know where to start." I looked at her. The arrogance was gone. Just a woman depleted by her own choices. "You want a quick fix, don't you?" I asked. Betrayal nodded, lips quivering. I answered slowly, "There are no shortcuts, Betrayal, only responsibility and repair." She lowered her head, tears mixing with rain. "I was wrong. I lost everything. Mason, the kids, even myself." I said nothing, just poured her a hot cup of tea. Mint filled the porch, masking the damp. From a drawer, I took a small envelope. Inside were no bills, only a list of job centers and counseling groups for people with controlling behaviors. I slid it toward her. "These are contacts and addresses. They'll help if you truly want to start over." She held it and looked up. "Can I see the kids?" "The court was clear," I said. "If you complete the counseling sessions, you can have supervised visits. Mason won't block it, and neither will I." She nodded, eyes wet. "And one more thing," I added, gentle but firm. "I won't hand you cash, not a dollar. But if you need a hot meal or honest advice, this porch stays open as long as you walk in with honesty." Silence stretched. Then Betrayal choked out, "I'm sorry, Lorraine." I looked at her a long time. I hear you, and I accept it in my own way. She left when the rain eased, her small figure faded down the speckled road. I knew the loop of resentment had snapped, at least on my end. That night we ate clam chowder together. Mason shared about his support group and said he was helping another single dad find work. I smiled. You're learning to give without losing yourself. Ava ate while telling us how she fell off her bike, scraped her knee, but got up on her own. Grandma, I didn't cry. I remembered what you said. No one stays down if they know how to stand up. I ruffled her hair. Good job, Ava. Micah sat with hands folded, eyes closed. I pray my mom gets better soon. The room fell quiet. I heard wind slip through the window and smelled cinnamon steaming from the pot. After dinner, I stood on the porch, watching Seabrook Bay sink into dark red sunset. Ripples glinted like shards of glass, beautiful, and a reminder that anything once broken can shine again if the light comes from within. I thought of Arthur. If he were here, he'd probably smile and say, "See, Lorraine? In the end, we are our choices." And I had chosen self-respect, clarity, and love with boundaries. That night I wrote the last lines in my notebook. No one can start a new chapter by rereading the old one forever. Today, I closed the book not to end it, but to begin again. I set down my pen and looked up at the ceiling. The rain had stopped. Far off, Mason's porch light still glowed warm, not bright, but steady. Ava and Micah were surely asleep, and Brielle somewhere might be learning how to be a decent mother again. I smiled and lit a small candle before Arthur's photo. "Love," I whispered. "I've gone farther than the pain, and I've come back to myself. Thank you for sitting beside me all the way to this moment. If you're still here, you've traveled with me through storms and the quiet places only the heart can hear. What city are you watching from? I'd love to know where this story has reached, and who's listening with me. If anything in this story touched you, self-respect, resilience, or simply love with limits, leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if you'd like to keep sitting with me in this kitchen where there's hot tea, clam chowder, and stories of healing, please subscribe and tap the little bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Your presence wherever you are warms this kitchen more than any flame ever could. It had been 3 months since the last time I saw my son's family. This morning, when I got his call inviting me to dinner, I almost cried with joy. I spent the whole afternoon baking an apple pie and buying my grandson a new toy car. My heart overflowed with happiness as I walked up to the door of the house I had helped them buy. But what greeted me was my daughter-in-law's fake smile and an ice-cold line. "Mom, we've got unexpected guests tonight. There's no room for you." My son stood behind her, head down, saying nothing. From inside, my grandson's voice floated out. "Who's here, Mom?" "It's not important, honey," my daughter-in-law answered flatly. I froze. The rain fell harder by the minute. I was shivering in my soaked clothes while they sat down to a warm dinner inside. I stood there for 3 hours, in the cold wind and humiliation, until the warmth in my chest came from clarity. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and quietly locked every account they were living off. Soon, she would learn that tonight's rain was only the beginning of the real storm headed her way. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Marjorie Bennett, 70 years old, a widow for almost 8 years. I live alone in a small house in Portland, Oregon, the home my husband Walter and I spent more than 30 years building. After he died of heart disease, I had no one left but Ethan, my only son, and his wife, Clara. I used to think that as long as I helped them, I still had a family. Ethan is a civil engineer, gentle and quiet. Clara, my daughter-in-law, is a beautiful, sharp woman, but cold as glass. From the day they married, she made me feel like an uninvited guest in my own son's life. Even so, I did what any mother would do. I gave everything. I pulled from my savings to cover their mortgage, helped them buy a new car, and paid private school tuition for Leo. Each month, most of my pension went straight into Ethan's account to ease the burden for the young couple. And I told myself, that's a mother's joy. So when Ethan called that day, inviting me to dinner after 3 busy months, my heart blossomed. I hadn't heard my grandson's voice for too long. Leo is 9, curly-haired, and loves my stories about when his grandpa was alive. I wanted to see him, to hold him, to hear about school. I spent the whole afternoon getting ready. I chose the navy dress, Walter once said, lights up the whole room when you wear it. I took from the wooden box the pearl necklace he gave me for our 30th anniversary. I spritzed a little lavender perfume, the scent Leo once said, smells like your baked treats, Grandma. Before leaving, I put the still warm apple pie and Leo's new toy car into a basket. I looked at the clock, 5:30. Enough time to take the bus across town. On the way, I couldn't stop smiling, picturing my grandson squealing when he saw the gift. When I reached their neighborhood, crimson maple leaves littered the path. A quiet pride rose in me. I had paid most of the down payment for this house. Ethan once said, "Mom, I don't know how to thank you enough." I just smiled. Your happiness is thanks enough. I rang the bell right at 6. The rain started tapping, light as a greeting. I heard footsteps, then the door opened. Clara appeared in a fitted black dress, the very one I'd given her last month. "Oh, you're here already?" she said, voice flat as water. "Of course." Ethan said dinner at 6. I brought apple pie for Leo. I smiled, hands trembling slightly from the rain. Clara glanced past me, then lowered her voice. "Actually, we have unexpected guests tonight. We're short on food, so I can help. I brought extra pie," I answered, trying to keep my voice cheerful. She gave a tight smile, turned inside, and said something. A minute later, Ethan came out. The look in my son's eyes made my heart pinch. He wouldn't meet my gaze. "Mom, I'm sorry. We have guests tonight. There's no room for you. No room for Mom." The words dropped into me like a stone. I stood there, stunned. "But you invited me, Ethan. You said, 'I know, but it's just unexpected. I'll come by tomorrow, okay?'" I felt my lips move, but no sound came out. The rain thickened. Wind swept under the porch. I hugged the basket tighter, trying to steady my hands. From inside, Leo's bright voice rang out. "Who's here, Mom?" "It's not important, honey," Clara answered, dry as dust. Not important. His grandmother not important. I stood still for a few seconds, then whispered, "I understand. I'll go." But I didn't leave right away. I stepped back under the small awning. Warm light spilled from the house. The smell of food drifted out, roast meat, wine, laughter. Inside was my family. Outside, in the cold rain, was me, a stranger. At first I thought I'd walk away, but my legs wouldn't move. I looked through the window, saw Clara pouring wine, Ethan chatting with guests, Leo sitting quietly, having no idea his grandmother was standing out there in the rain. Time crawled with cruelty. 5 minutes. 10. 30. The rain grew heavy. Water running through my hair. Icy at the nape of my neck. I tried to shield the gifts, but the wrapping paper was soaked. The toy car peeked through the clear plastic. The apple pie cooled in its box. An hour passed. Music drifted out. They played "Fly Me to the Moon," Walter's favorite. I pressed my lips together, fighting tears. After 2 hours, I began to shake with cold. 3 hours later, my legs were numb, my heart leaden. When the window cracked open, I saw Clara say something to a friend, eyes darting toward me. She smiled, not from awkwardness, but from pleasure. I saw her lips form the words, then caught a few. Let her learn not to show up uninvited. I tightened my grip on the basket handle. Something inside me, shattered then hardened to steel. I didn't scream, didn't wail, didn't cry. I took a deep breath and let the rain wash away the last of my tears. I kept standing there, hoping for a small miracle that Ethan would open the door, realize his mistake, and say, "Mom, come in." But the door stayed still. Only music from the living room, the clink of cutlery on china, and faraway laughter. I stepped up to the porch again and knocked. This time, Ethan appeared, looking flustered and tired. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly, eyes on the wood floor. "Tonight's really inconvenient." Before I could answer, Clara cut in from behind him. "Older folks should know when to go home." "It's raining, you'd better leave before you catch a cold." I looked straight at her. "I'm here because my son invited me, not because I'm nosy." Clara gave a thin smile. "What invitation?" Ethan only said, "Maybe. You misheard." Ethan stayed silent, didn't object, didn't defend me. He only lowered his head. In that moment, I understood silence can be crueler than words. Through the crack, I caught a glimpse of Leo on the stairs, his small face lighting up. "Grandma," he whispered, then flinched as Clara turned. "Upstairs," she snapped. "Grandma's busy, she can't talk." "But, up." He vanished around the corner, a door thudded shut, heavy as my heart hitting the floor. The rain thickened, water seeped down my collar, freezing. The gift basket weighed on my arm. The apple pie I'd baked all afternoon was soggy, butter scent mingling with rain. The gift wrap around Leo's toy melted, sticking to my fingers. I tried to hold it together, but the red paper tore, revealing the little blue car inside, the only thing still intact. I turned to leave, then stopped when Clara's voice carried from the dining room, clear through the door. "I'm done, Ethan. She uses money like a leash. Don't you see? She always wants a hand in our business." Ethan's tired voice. "She's just helping." "Helping? Helping to control us, more like it. I'm sick of always having to thank Mom for everything. This house, this car, even Leo's tuition, all from her money. Aren't you ashamed?" Each word was a blade. I stood frozen. The baby boy I once held through feverish nights now sitting silent while his wife insulted me in the house I helped them buy. I gripped the wooden railing. A sharp ache shot through my finger joints. The rain wasn't what made me shake anymore, it was the humiliation. "Ethan, I'm serious," Clara went on. "If she had no money, do you think she'd still show up? She just needs to feel powerful." A small laugh rose from someone at the table. I didn't know who. I only knew that, in that instant, something in me broke for good. I raised my head and looked through the window, saw them eating under warm light, looking so happy. They didn't know that out there, the trembling old woman in the rain was quietly laying down the role of the generous mother they'd exploited for years. I breathed in, cold, soaking to the bone. I opened my purse and took out my phone. My hand shook, but my voice when the call connected was steady. "Hello," I said. "This is Marjorie Bennett. I need to lock all joint accounts under my name, including authorized user cards, savings, and online access. Please process it tonight." The line hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." "May I confirm?" I answered, crisp. "No reason needed. Just do it now." 7 minutes later, when I ended the call, I knew the rain had washed away not only the grime on the street, but also the last bit of naivete in me. I stood in the open, exhaled, and looked up at the lit house. They still laughed, still chatted, still lived under the illusion that I'd always be that weak woman. They didn't know in just a few hours, everything in their lives would turn, and this time, the one steering the storm would be me. I lingered under their porch a while longer, listening to the rain blend with the living room laughter, a sound so strange it hurt. Then I left, my soaked shoes slapping on the paving stones. The road home was dark, only streetlights shimmering on puddles. I walked slowly, letting anger and humiliation dissolve with each step. Back home, I hung up my coat, wiped my face, and sat in the armchair by the window, Walter's spot for morning papers. The little room felt warm, but inside I was still cold. Outside, the rain didn't let up. It fell steady, stubborn, as if cleansing something too. I looked at the phone in my hand, the screen still showing the recent call to the bank. I knew I'd just done something irreversible, and strangely, I wasn't afraid. I called back, this time to confirm everything. The rep, a young woman with a gentle voice, reviewed the details. "Mrs. Marjorie Bennett, I confirm we've temporarily locked all accounts connected to your name, including savings, retirement, and any joint accounts with Mr. Ethan Bennett." I answered softly. "That's right. And I want to ensure all access, authorized cards, and transaction authorizations are frozen. No exceptions." A pause. "Ma'am, this will temporarily suspend all usage for the co-holder. Are you certain? They won't be able to withdraw, pay, or transfer anything." I looked out the window, through the blurred curtain of rain. For a moment, I could almost see their house far off in memory. Warm lights, wine glasses, laughter. And Clara's tilted head, that smug smile as she raised her glass, like toasting a victory she thought was locked in. "I'm more certain than I've ever been," I said, oddly calm. "Please mark it for tonight." "Yes, ma'am," the young woman replied. "I'll note it as urgent." "One moment, please." I heard keys clacking, a system processing, then a short stillness. "All set, Mrs. Bennett," she said. "Every account is now safely locked. Would you like us to email a confirmation?" "No need. I'll know when they call me in the morning," I murmured. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" I paused, then said, "If you have a mom, hug her one more time tonight. Don't wait until it's only rain falling to realize you've been silent too long." A quiet beat on the other end. "I will, ma'am." When the call ended, I set the phone down and let out a slow breath. A lightness flooded me, like I'd just slipped a shackle I'd worn for years without noticing. I stood, went to the kitchen, turned on the soft yellow light, and boiled water for ginger tea. The steam rose warm and spicy, soothing my chest. I cracked the window to let in night air, damp earth, and the patter on the tin roof. I sat, cupped the mug, and drifted into memory. I remembered my years as a nurse, endless night shifts, swollen feet from 8 hours on them, hands rough from rubber gloves and antiseptic. I remembered pinching pennies to buy Ethan his first school shoes, paying for his graduation suit, and quietly borrowing so he could study engineering. I never hesitated, never asked for anything back, because I believed that's what mothers do, and for 40 years I never doubted that. Until tonight. Thunder rumbled far off, low and heavy, like a weary heartbeat. I stared through the rain, remembering Ethan's averted eyes. Not the eyes of someone who hates you, the eyes of a son trapped between loyalty and cowardice. I wasn't angry with him, but the disappointment smoldered slow and deep like coals under ash. I set the cup down and switched on the small lamp in the living room. My little house, plain as it was, felt cozier than ever. No fake laughter, no snide remarks, just the warmth of my own company, and suddenly, that felt precious. On the shelf, our wedding photo still sat. Walter in a gray suit, me in a simple white dress, both of us smiling kindly. I stroked the frame and whispered, "Walter, I finally learned the lesson you tried to teach me. I can't save someone by losing myself." A tear slid down, and I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall, the way the rain was erasing the day outside. I stepped onto the porch with my warm tea. The rain had softened, steady as a lullaby. I inhaled, letting the ginger heat my chest again. In the quiet, I told myself, tomorrow they'll taste the real storm. Not because I want revenge. I just want them to understand kindness isn't a test, and a mother's silence doesn't mean weakness. I went back in, folded the bank notebook closed, and tucked it in the drawer. Lamplight reflected my face in the window, still me, but different. There was something in my eyes, a calm firmness I'd never seen there before. I turned off the light and headed to bed. The rain outside kept time like a heart. Tonight, I would sleep well. Because in the morning, when they found the accounts frozen, they'd know what it feels like to be left in the rain, and maybe then they would finally understand me. The next morning, Portland was strangely still. After a long night of rain, the air was crisp, faint with pine and damp earth. I made my coffee as usual, one strong scoop, a splash of almond milk, then sat by the window. Pale sunlight filtered through the blinds, tinting the little kitchen a soft yellow. I took a sip, the bitter spreading across my tongue. Inside, there was no anger, no sadness, just a quiet space I couldn't name, like a lake after a storm. I flipped on the small radio, a jazz tune Walter used to love. On the table, last night's ginger tea still carried a gentle scent. Then the phone rang. The tone trilled fast, insistent. I glanced at the screen, Ethan. I smiled, set down the cup, and took a steady breath before picking up. "Good morning, son," I said evenly. Ethan's voice came fast, panicked. "Mom, what happened?" "Clara's card got declined. Then the bank called saying, the accounts are frozen. My card doesn't work either. Did you do something?" I stirred my coffee, the spoon's clink ringing against porcelain. "Oh, probably a system issue," I answered slowly. "Try living without it for a bit." A half-second of silence, then Clara's voice cut in high and furious. "If you don't unlock them, I'll sue. This is theft." I raised an eyebrow and smiled. "You can try. But do check who's the primary name on the deed, the bank records, and the mortgage." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear Clara swallow. Then she shouted, voice shaking, "You'll regret this!" "Maybe," I said. "But at least this time, I won't regret staying silent." I hung up. The phone rang again right after this time, the bank confirming every account had been fully frozen per my request. I thanked them calmly and ended the call like I'd just checked off a normal task. A few minutes later, the doorbell chimed. I guessed it was no one but Helen, my neighbor of 20 years, a widow who had witnessed so many chapters of my family's story. Helen stepped in with a basket of warm bread and a gentle smile. "I heard arguing from Ethan's house at dawn. Everything okay, Marge?" I poured her a cup of coffee and gave her the short version. When I got to the part where Clara threatened to sue, Helen burst into bright laughter. "Well, you finally did what you should have done ages ago. I didn't think you had it in you." I smiled and shrugged. I didn't either, but maybe after standing in the rain for 3 hours, anyone would find the nerve to do something different. Helen squeezed my hand, voice low. "You know, people only discover their strength when there's no one left to lean on." We sat quietly for a while, listening to cars on the street and sparrows on the roof. In my small kitchen, the light washed over 2 women who'd lived through too many seasons, and in Helen's eyes, I saw a reflection of myself, calm, tired, but still proud. After Helen left, I walked around the house. Everything felt so familiar that it calmed me. Walter's bookshelf, the stack of old medical files, the embroidered curtains I'd sewn by hand. I opened the desk drawer and took out an old notebook with the will I'd written 2 years ago. I spread the paper on the table. Each line was neat and careful, the ink slightly faded where I'd signed. "All assets, real estate, and savings will be transferred to my son, Ethan Bennett, and my daughter-in-law, Clara Bennett." I read it again, my lips trembling. I remembered believing, when I wrote this will, that it was how I could hold the family together. I was afraid that if I didn't give, they would drift away. Now I understand it was that unconditional giving that pushed them away from me. I picked up a pen and drew a straight line through the words Clara Bennett. Then I paused over my son's name. 1 minute, 2, 3 passed. Then I crossed that out too. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "It's not because I hate you, Ethan. It's because I want you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I rewrote the ending. All assets will be used to establish a fund to support older adults who are financially and emotionally abused by family members. The fund will be called the Walter and Marjorie Foundation. I signed again and folded the paper carefully. Do you believe that sometimes giving to strangers is the best way to save your loved ones or at least yourself? If you were in my place, would you do the same? I truly want to hear your honest thoughts in the comments. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Mr. Harris, who had handled my real estate paperwork. When I told him I wanted to update my will, he was a little surprised but said, "I'll get the documents ready, Mrs. Bennett." I took a walk to the nearby park where the willows swayed in the breeze. Children ran around, laughter filling the air, and I sat on a wooden bench, watching the sky begin to brighten. A lightness rose in me as if I had finally taken back ownership of my life. Around noon, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Ethan, it was Leo, my grandson. His voice was small and shaky. "Grandma, Mom said you did something that made them mad. Are you sick?" "Dad isn't saying anything, just sitting there." I swallowed hard and kept my voice warm. "No, I'm fine, Leo. I'm just teaching your parents a small lesson. You'll understand someday. Can I come over to play with you?" I smiled. "When the sun's out, I'll come get you." When I hung up, the tears finally came. Not from pain, but from tenderness for a child too young to understand the splits between adults. I wiped my eyes and told myself, "One day, you'll know I did all this so you could grow up in a world that respects those who raised you." The afternoon passed quietly. I watered the plants, reorganized the bookshelves, and wrote a few lines in my journal. Today, for the first time in years, I am bound to no one. I'm no longer a shadow behind someone else's front door. I am Marjorie Bennett, and I am free. Night fell and Portland settled into a thin mist. I brewed an herbal tea, turned on the desk lamp, and looked over the new will again. The light fell across the freshly dried signature, the strokes firm and final. Softly, I spoke to Walter. "See, I finally learned how to stand up. No shouting, no blame, just one word. Enough." I slid the new will into an envelope, sealed it, and locked it in the safe. The click of the metal lock was small, but it echoed inside me like a bell of release. Outside, the breeze stirred the curtains, and pale moonlight slipped through the window pane. I looked out at the wide sky, took a deep breath, and felt my heart beating slowly, steadily, stronger than ever. Tomorrow, I knew they would keep calling, maybe show up at my door, maybe cry, maybe rage. That was fine, because this time, I wouldn't back down. I smiled slightly, turned off the light, and told myself, they left me standing in the rain for 3 hours. Now it's their turn to feel that cold. Then I went to bed, pulled up the blanket, and slept deeply, the first real rest in years, knowing my heart was finally at peace. The next morning, Portland was still damp from the night's rain. I was making coffee when the door pounded hard enough to rattle the frame. I knew right away it was them, Ethan and Clara. I opened the door. My son stood straight with his hands in his pockets, face pale from lack of sleep. Next to him, Clara wore a long coat, makeup hurriedly done, eyes red, whether from real tears or not, I couldn't tell. I stood across the threshold, quietly looking at 2 people I had once believed were my family. "We just want to talk," Ethan said softly. "Fine," I answered. "Come in." But today, no one gets to dodge the truth. Inside, Helen, my neighbor, was already seated at the dining table. I'd asked her to come early. Not out of fear, but because I wanted a witness. Clara sat, hands shaking, trying to sound gentle. "Mom, it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't mean." I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to say. I looked at her, my eyes cold. "What misunderstanding made you shut the door in my face and leave me in the rain for 3 hours? Or what misunderstanding made you call me fake, a burden, an old dog?" The air froze. Ethan turned to his wife, stunned. "Did you really say that?" I didn't answer. Helen spoke up, slow and steady. I heard it all, Clara. Through the window next door. Every word you said to your friend. That can't be called a misunderstanding. Clara quickly wiped her tears. I'm sorry, I lost control. It was too stressed, I cut in. Sorry doesn't mean anything when the person saying it can't even remember what they did. If you're sincere, repeat it, word for word. Just like you said that night. She froze, looking to Ethan for rescue. He lowered his head, silent. Helen stayed still, hands clasped on the table, eyes fixed on Clara. I'm sorry, Clara stammered. I heard that, I said. But I want to hear the exact words you used. Her voice tightened, shrinking to a rasp. I'm sorry for calling you fake. I said nothing. I'm sorry for saying you were a burden. The room was so thick with tension you could hear the wall clock tick. I still didn't speak. Helen glanced down, her hands tightening, holding back anger. Clara swallowed, eyes blurring. And I'm sorry for calling you an old dog. The last word broke into a sob. Ethan turned away, gripping the chair. I sat still, looking at the woman in front of me, not with hatred but with emptiness. Those words had once been knives, now they were only echoes. I stood, voice steady. If you're truly sorry, kneel. Clara stared at me, incredulous. What? You heard me. I don't need a performance. I don't need you to pretend. I want to know if you have enough courage to bow your head to your own wrongdoing. Are you trying to humiliate me? She snapped, voice cracking. I held her gaze without blinking. I'm not doing anything. I'm letting you see the same humiliation you threw at someone else. Clara stepped back. Ethan started to speak, but I cut him off. Don't get involved, Ethan. You weren't the one humiliated that day. You were the one who stayed silent while your mother was. He froze, eyes clouded. Helen turned away with a sigh. In the small room, the rain outside grew louder, in rhythm with my steady heartbeat. I didn't shout or command. I just waited. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd leave. Then Clara's lips trembled, and she whispered, "Fine." She stepped forward slowly, each step heavy, dragging her pride along with it. You don't have to, Ethan started, but Clara held up a hand. She stood in front of me, eyes glassy with tears, and then sank down. Her knees hit the wooden floor with a dull thud in the quiet room. Her hair was a mess. Mascara streaked black down her cheeks. Tears fell, blending with the sound of rain on the eaves, the wet, weighty sound of a storm brought low. She spoke through ragged sobs. I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes hollow. Helen glanced at me, lips pressed tight. I said nothing. I just looked, letting this image etch into my memory, not for revenge, but to remind myself that silence can be powerful when used at the right moment. The room held nothing but harsh breathing and rain. On the cold wood floor, Clara knelt, tears mixed with shame, and I knew this confrontation had finally reached its true end. The room still held the chill and scent of the morning rain as Clara knelt on the wood floor, her shoulders trembling, tears streaking through the mascara on her cheeks. I stood still, looking down at her not with the eyes of a victor, but of a mother who had finally had enough. I was quiet for a few seconds, then drew a long breath. All right, Clara, you can stand up. I don't need you down there any longer. Now we move to part 2, the new rules. Clara lifted her head, eyes exhausted, and Ethan looked up slightly, stunned. Rules? He repeated. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and set both hands on the old wooden table. Helen, still there, watched in silence. The dim light from the window fell across my face, and even I knew there was no room left for pity. That's right, I said slowly, clearly. From today on, if you two still want to set foot in this house or have any relationship with me at all, you will follow a mother's 10 rules. Clara wiped her cheeks, voice hoarse. Are you trying to control our whole lives? I gave a small smile. No, I'm taking back control of mine. Helen nodded gently in agreement. I opened the small notebook where I'd written everything last night, firm strokes like a vow. I looked straight at them. Let's begin. First rule, no more reckless spending. I looked at Ethan. From now on, you won't get those little bits of help every month. I worked my whole life to save, not to watch you spend it on restaurants, cars, or things that only make people look rich. Ethan started to protest, but I raised my hand. Son, I lived on a nurse's modest paycheck and raised you, and I never owed anyone. If I could do it, so can the two of you. My money is not an open bank for anyone to withdraw from at will. Clara dropped her gaze and bit her lip. Helen quietly smiled and jotted a note on the paper beside her. Second rule, I support Leo only, not the two of you. My voice softened a touch. I won't let my grandson go without. Tuition, clothes, anything necessary for Leo, I'll cover it. But all payments will go directly to the school or his legal guardian, not through either of you anymore. Ethan nodded slightly. Clara looked like she wanted to speak, then only sighed. If you truly care about your son, I said, you'll understand this is what's best for him. Third rule, Clara has 30 days to get a job. I met her eyes. 30 days. Not to prove anything to me, but to prove you can still live on your own merits. I won't cover credit cards, shopping, or any bill. If on day 30 you still don't have a job, you will leave that house. Clara glared. Leave my house? I lifted my chin, calm. That house is still in my name, Clara. You've been staying there by my grace. The air tightened. Ethan shut his eyes briefly, accepting the truth he'd avoided for years. I'm giving you time, I said. But don't forget, my son Mercy doesn't extend forever. Fourth rule, don't show up unless you're invited. My voice dropped. For years, I've been the one calling, sending gifts, visiting, and arranging every family gathering. From now on, if I don't invite, you don't come. Don't knock, don't pretend to drop by, don't bring a cheap gift and a fake smile. Let this house be truly quiet. Clara bowed her head, lips tight. Ethan stayed silent. Helen added a few lines, her mouth set like she was holding back a sigh. Fifth rule. One disrespectful word and all support ends forever. I leaned slightly and looked at both of them. I've had enough of insults, fake tears, and complicit silence. If there is even one more disrespectful line, I will act as if you never existed in my life. No warning, no forgiveness, no return. Helen lifted her head, looked at me. I'll bold that one, she said firmly. Clara shivered. I saw her hand clutch her coat, fear flickering under the last of her pride. Ethan said nothing, looking like a man waking from a long daze. I closed the notebook, set the pen on the table, and looked at Helen. Now I want a clear record, not a contract, a family agreement. Helen understood. She pulled a blank sheet and began writing, "Agreement between Mrs. Marjorie Bennett and her son Ethan Bennett and his wife Clara Bennett. All parties agree to the rules as stated, witnessed by Helen Porter." She read each line, steady and clear. I nodded and signed. Helen signed next, then slid the page to Ethan. He took the pen with a trembling hand. I understand, Mom," he said quietly, and signed. The pen stopped in front of Clara. She looked at me, eyes wet. "Do you really want to humiliate me this much?" I shook my head. "No, Clara. I want you to learn to respect other people's boundaries. The humiliation, that's what you sowed for yourself." She said nothing more and signed. The signature wobbled, crooked like her pride, cracking apart. Helen folded the paper into a file and said, "That's that. From now on, everything is clear." The room went still. On the porch, sunlight began to push through the clouds, reflecting on the wood floor where a faint, damp mark still showed where Clara had knelt. She stood, grabbed her purse, and said nothing. When she turned, her eyes met mine, no hatred left, only fear and shame. Ethan lowered his head, squeezed his wife's hand, and together they walked out. A light breeze crossed the porch, carrying the lingering scent of coffee through the air. Helen exhaled and said softly, "I've never seen you this strong, Marge." I smiled and answered gently, "It's not strength, Helen. I'm just too tired to be weak anymore." She nodded, her gaze softening. "These 10 rules aren't only for them. You know? They're for other mothers too, the ones who need to remember that love still needs boundaries." I looked out the window, where the first sunbeams lit the rain still clinging to the glass. Inside me rose a deep calm, not joy, but release. That day, for the first time in years, I sat in my own home, in quiet and light, and realized a mother's strength isn't about how much she sacrifices, it's about knowing when to stop. And I stopped. This time, for good. In the days that followed, spring came to Portland. Clear skies, soft winds, trees starting to bud. My life slipped back into simple rhythms I'd forgotten. Getting up early, making coffee, reading the paper, walking with Helen around the park, then coming home to cook myself lunch. No more sudden calls begging for an urgent few $100s, no more long texts listing bills due. Just quiet, pure, like the breath of freedom. I didn't know how they were managing on the other side of town, not until Helen brought the paper over and said, "You know, I saw Clara at the supermarket. She looked like she hadn't slept in days." I nodded lightly, saying nothing. I didn't feel happy, but I didn't pity her either. Sometimes life has to let people taste their own consequences. Ethan called me for the first time after nearly a week of silence. His voice was hoarse, tired. "Mom, I'm trying to get things in order. Leo's tuition is coming due, and I still can't pull it together." I sipped my tea and answered calmly, "Don't worry, I've paid the school directly. Leo won't go without." Silence on the line. I heard a soft exhale, then a quiet, "Thank you, Mom," I replied. "No need to thank me. I'm taking care of Leo, not the two of you." After that call, I knew he understood. Some wounds don't need words. Silence is enough to wake people up. 3 days later, on a damp afternoon, I was replanting a few lavender pots on the porch when I heard a car stop at the gate. I looked up, and there was Clara. No makeup, hair tied in a rush, a wrinkled coat. She walked slowly, like she was carrying a mountain of embarrassment on her shoulders. Can I come in?" I looked at her, then opened the gate. "If you're here to talk, yes." We sat in the kitchen. The air still smelled faintly of coffee. She glanced around, maybe realizing for the first time that my small house wasn't luxurious at all, but clean, tidy, and warm, a far cry from their cold, big place. "I don't know where to start," Clara said, her voice rough. "We're in real trouble. Ethan's trying, but his paycheck isn't enough. I'm only asking you for a small amount. Just this once." I set my cup down and looked her straight in the eye. "You don't need money, Clara. You need to learn self-respect." She froze. "You think I don't have self-respect?" "I don't think." "I see." I spoke slowly. "You've lived on other people's money so long you forgot what it feels like to stand on your own 2 feet. You think money fixes everything, when really it just covers a hole inside you." Clara went quiet, her eyes flickering between anger and shame. "You don't understand. I used to have a job. I used to have dignity. But after I married Ethan, I thought I could stay home with our child, take care of the house." I cut in, gentle but firm. "You didn't take care of your child. You took care of your pride." A heavy pause. She bit her lip, then whispered, "I've been looking for work. But all they offer are manual jobs, retail, server. I can't. I don't want the pitying looks. It's beneath me." I gave a small smile, not angry. "Beneath you?" I stood. went to a cabinet and took out an old photo frame. In the picture, it's me in a nurse's uniform, hollow-cheeked, hands cracked, holding a mop. See this? I scrubbed hospital floors for 20 years. I changed adult diapers, bathed the dying, cleaned wounds most people couldn't stand to look at. I did it so your husband could eat and study. And not once did I feel beneath anyone. Clara lowered her head, her hands clenched together. I saw tears start to fill her eyes, but she held them back. I'm not ashamed of being poor, Clara, I went on, softer. I'm ashamed when someone who can work chooses to bow to money instead. She sighed, voice shaking. You're strong. I can't be like that. I pulled my chair closer and sat beside her. You think I was born strong? No. I was weak too. I cried when people looked down on me, but I never forgot one thing. People only belittle you when you allow them to. That sentence broke her. This time, the tears weren't for show. She bent her head, shoulders shaking, real sobs breaking loose. I let her be no pat on the shoulder, no soothing words. I let her cry like a child because sometimes only at the bottom of pride can someone finally see who they are. After a few minutes, she looked up, eyes swollen, voice raw. I don't know where to start. I smiled gently. Anywhere. A coffee shop, a corner store, the bakery down the block. No one says you have to start at the top. What matters is that you actually start. She stayed quiet. Her eyes drifted to the wood floor, the same spot where, weeks ago, she'd knelt in humiliation. Now, a thin ray of afternoon sun slipped through the door and lit a small streak across it. Clara saw it, and so did I. I spoke slowly, low and warm. Self-respect can't be borrowed, Clara. It only arrives when you stand up and earn your first meal without putting out your hand. The day you do that, you'll understand what I'm saying now. She nodded, said nothing, just whispered, I'll try. I stood, refilled our water, then looked at her one last time before she left. You don't need to thank me. Thank yourself for being ashamed at the right time. She pressed her lips together and left. Her steps were slow, but steadier than when she arrived. I stood at the door and watched her disappear under the trees. Helen called over from next door. Was that her again? I nodded. Yes, and maybe for the first time, she didn't come here to perform. Helen smiled and waved. I always knew you could make people change without raising your voice. I answered softly, half to her, half to myself. No one changes in a day, Helen. But today, I saw her first real tears, and maybe that's the start of something. I went back inside and made another cup of tea. Outside, evening fell. Light spilled onto the wooden porch, a peaceful scatter of gold. I sat down, light as a cloud. Maybe true forgiveness doesn't come from pity, it comes from daring to look at someone in their weakest moment and believing they can be better than yesterday. And I knew that somewhere, in Clara's shame today, a seed of change had been planted. One May morning, while I was making coffee, a soft knock sounded at the door. Not the hard, tense pounding Clara used. This knock was hesitant, almost afraid of being turned away. I opened it. Ethan stood there, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled shirt. He bowed his head and rasped, "Mom, can I come in?" Looking at my son, my heart gave a quick, sharp beat, not out of pity, but because in that worn-out posture, I knew he was finally seeing what he used to ignore. I nodded. "Come in, Ethan. This door has never been locked to you." He sat at the kitchen table, where the smell of fresh coffee still hung. I poured him a cup. His hands shook so much, a few drops splashed. He lifted it to his lips but didn't drink. I don't know where to start," he said, voice cracking. "Everything's worse than ever." I waited. "Clara," he drew a deep breath, "she can't find a job and she blames me. Yesterday she called me useless in front of Leo, said I live off my mother, that I'm an embarrassment to her friends." He lowered his head and covered his face. "Mom, I can't take it anymore." Every time I try to talk, she starts yelling, brings up the money, the house, all the things I know you gave. I didn't say anything, just set my hand on his shoulder. Now you see, don't you? When money disappears, real love either shows up or it disappears with it. Ethan looked up, eyes red. You're right. I was blinded. I thought she just needed love, needed to feel safe. Turns out what she needed wasn't a person next to her, it was a life she could show off. He let out a bitter laugh. I was foolish, Mom. I thought siding with my wife proved I was a grown man, but really I let her control us both. I looked at my son, aching and relieved at once. He was cutting the cord that had bound him for years, late but brave. I poured more coffee and asked, Ethan, do you want to live in fear or in truth? He looked confused. I don't understand. You do, I said slowly. You're afraid of losing her, afraid of breaking, afraid Leo won't have his mother. But you forget what you're trading away. You're letting yourself be diminished day after day. Is that living? He stayed quiet. Sunlight slid through the window onto his face, thinner than before. I spoke softly. Do you remember, Ethan? When you were little and I worked night shifts for weeks? I'd come home smelling like antiseptic, hair damp with sweat, and you'd run to me and say, Mom's a superhero. You were proud of me for doing what you couldn't imagine. Now tell me, are you proud of yourself? He bowed his head, said nothing. A tear fell and dotted the back of his hand. No, he whispered. I'm not the man you raised me to be. I let Clara control everything. I know she's wrong, but I'm scared to make her mad, scared to lose the perfect family people see. I've never really been a strong husband. I touched his hand lightly and murmured, admitting that means you've started to change. He nodded, breathing deep. I just don't know where to start, Mom. I stood, went to my desk, and took out a small envelope. I set it in front of him. This is a copy of the agreement from the other day. Not to throw in anyone's face, but to remind you that boundaries are now clear. No one gets to blame the past anymore. Ethan opened it, eyes landing on Clara's shaky signature. He gave a sad smile. She signed it, but she didn't get it. To her, everything's a power game. I sat across from him, voice firm. No one can take your power unless you hand it over. You handed it over with your silence. Ethan nodded, voice tight. I understand. Just then, the landline rang. I saw the caller ID, Leo's school. I picked up. Mrs. Bennett, we're calling to inform you Leo's tuition for this term is still unpaid. We've tried to reach his parents without success. I glanced at Ethan. He looked flustered, mouthing an apology. I spoke into the phone, steady. Thank you for calling. Please contact Leo's parents directly. I won't step in for them this time. I hung up. Ethan stared, unsure. Mom, I thought you were still helping with Leo? I am, Ethan. But I can't keep paying for choices you won't take responsibility for. If you want Leo to have a future, his parents need to learn how to earn it. He bowed his head, didn't argue. Silence stretched, thick enough to hear the clock tick. I turned away, poured more coffee, and spoke slowly. Ethan, I'm giving you 72 hours. In the next 3 days, you decide. Either she changes or you leave. There's no third option. If you stay in a marriage you know is rotten, you're teaching Leo to endure mistakes instead of fixing them. He looked up, eyes wide. 72 hours? Yes, I don't need an answer now, but at the end of 3 days, I want you here not to cry, but to tell me what you chose, because this time, I won't rescue you. I walked to the window. Outside, the sun began to break through. Light danced on the leaves, and across Ethan's face, the face I'd shielded for 40 years, now like a child learning to step on his own. He sat there a long time. Then he spoke, voice rough. Do you believe in me, Mom? I turned and met his eyes. Since the day you were born, I've believed in you. The trouble is, I believed too much while you didn't believe in yourself. Ethan gave a sad smile, tears sliding down. I think I'm starting to understand you. I nodded. Good. I don't need a dutiful son anymore. I need a man who protects his own dignity." We sat in silence a few more minutes. I heard the clock shift. The wind tapped the window. When Ethan stood, he seemed different, not strong yet, but with a resolve in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. "I'll talk to Clara," he said, steady. "Not to. Fight to face the truth. I can't let Leo grow up in a house full of fear." I looked at my son, worried and proud. "Remember, Ethan, real change begins in silence. But after that, it has to be action." He nodded and stepped out. As his figure faded into the morning sun, I stood there, hand on the doorframe, feeling a mix of hurt and relief. My sun was cracking, but in those cracks, the first light of awakening was finding its way in, and I knew that if he dared to keep that light, everything would change. 3 days passed since Ethan came to see me. I didn't call or text. Partly to keep my word to let him decide, and partly because I knew what was happening in his house was harsher than any storm outside. On the third morning, while I was trimming lavender on the porch, Clara's familiar silver car screeched to a stop at the gate. The door flung open, and she stepped out, not pathetic like when she came begging, but furious, almost unhinged. "You ruined my family," she shouted, her voice ringing down the street. I calmly set the shears in the soil and brushed off my hands. "Good morning, Clara." "You're early." "Don't pretend to be polite." She marched toward me, face flushed, hands shaking. "This is all your fault. Since you cut the money, everything fell apart. Ethan wants a divorce," Leo's distant, "and it's all because of you." I stood, facing her, my eyes steady, my voice strangely calm. "Clara, I didn't ruin your family. I just cut off the money. The rest you did yourself." Her mouth fell open. For a few seconds nothing came out. A breeze blew, sticking a few strands of messy hair to her smudged lipstick. I went on, even and clear, like explaining to a child. "Families don't break because of a lack of money. They break because of a lack of respect. If you truly loved Ethan, you'd stand by him, even when he had nothing. But clearly, what you loved wasn't him. It was the life he could give." Thank you, while his mother stood behind him. Clara stepped back half a pace, eyes flashing between anger and shame. "You don't get it. I just want a better life, not to scrape by like poor people." I raised an eyebrow. "And who do you think I am?" I hauled trash in hospital rooms, mopped bathrooms, and ate cold meals for 20 years to raise your husband. I don't think being poor is degrading. I think holding your head high while living off others is what's truly pitiful." The air thickened. Clara opened her mouth to fire back, but no words came. I looked at her, tired but not angry. "You have 2 paths, Clara. Keep blaming others, or start living honestly. Choose." She pressed her lips together, turned, and walked off, her high heels sinking into the wet lawn, leaving muddy tracks across the stone path. The engine roared, and the car shot away, the smell of burnt rubber hanging in the morning air. I let out a long breath, not a sigh of relief, but the kind of breath from someone who knows the biggest battle has only just begun. That afternoon, I got a call from Ethan. His voice was low, tired, but steady. "Mom, I said it already. I don't want Leo growing up in a house full of fighting anymore." I stayed quiet. On the other end, I could hear him exhale, with Leo's faint crying in the background. "She went crazy, Mom. Threw things, cursed me out, said I'm useless, a failed man who's run by his mother." I didn't answer back. I just packed Leo's things and left. His voice tightened. "Mom, I've wasted too many years trying to prove I'm right. Now I just want peace." I closed my eyes and gripped the receiver. "You did the right thing, Ethan. She said she's leaving the house, Mom. She said she didn't get married to live like poor people." A sharp sadness pricked me, but I only breathed out softly. "Then let her go. Don't hold on to someone who chose to walk away when you're at your weakest." He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I'm on my way to you." I straightened up the small upstairs room that used to be Ethan's when he was little. Fresh sheets, a hint of lavender. I set a teddy bear on the bed. Leo's old toy was still here. As I was pulling the curtains, Ethan's car stopped at the gate. He got out, carrying Leo. The boy pressed his face into his father's shoulder, worn out and puffy from crying. I opened the door, and my heart squeezed when I saw those young eyes looking at me surprised and searching for a safe place. "Grandma," Leo blurted, then hurried over and hugged my legs. I bent down and held him tight. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's going to be okay." Ethan stood behind him with a small suitcase in hand. "Mom, we'll just stay a few days until I find somewhere else." I looked at him and shook my head lightly. "This is your home, Ethan. You don't need permission to come back." He lowered his head, eyes red. It took me years to figure that out. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Ethan sat with me in the living room. The warm lamplight fell across his face, still the same boy I once knew, only now marked by the wear of adulthood. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I was blind. I let my wife insult you. I left you standing outside in the rain, and I stayed silent. I deserve to lose everything." I set my hand on his. "No, Ethan, you haven't lost everything. You still have Leo, and you still have me. What you lost today was just the illusion of a fake happiness." He nodded, eyes far away. "I thought marriage was where you find peace, but maybe sometimes it's where you learn to love yourself better." I smiled faintly. "If you understand that, then divorce isn't an ending, it's a beginning." Meanwhile, Clara, I heard she'd applied to be a server at a small diner downtown. Helen told me she showed up to apply in broken heels, empty eyes, and a shaky voice. The owner looked at her, shook his head, then nodded out of pity. A week later, when I happened to pass by, I saw her outside the place, in a black uniform, hair tied back, a tray in hand. No lipstick, no arrogance, just a woman learning how to start over. She saw me and froze, eyes widening. I didn't stop. I just gave a small nod. In that brief moment, something flickered in her gaze. Not hatred anymore, but recognition. Maybe, at last, she understood. Sometimes freedom begins with what we lose. That night, once everything settled, I carried Leo upstairs. He'd fallen asleep, his head on my shoulder, breathing steady and warm. I laid him down, pulled up the blanket, and sat a moment, looking at that small face so much like his father's when he was little. Ethan stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame, relief in his eyes. "He's sleeping well," I said. "I don't think he's slept this peacefully in months," he answered. I nodded, brushing Leo's hair. "See, peace isn't something we chase down. It comes when we dare to let go of what hurts us." Ethan was quiet, eyes wet. "Mom, I'm grateful." I smiled gently and shook my head. "Don't thank me. Live in a way that honors it. This peace isn't only for me, it's for Leo too." He bowed his head. "I promise." I switched off the light and pulled the door almost shut. Outside, the night wind moved softly through the willows, carrying a sweet hint of lavender from the porch. I sat on the sofa with a throw across my legs. For the first time in years, the house was truly quiet. No more shouting, no more tears, no more pretending. Only the steady breathing of my grandson upstairs and my heart, peaceful, warm, whole. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Peace has come back." And this time I knew it would stay. A year passed since the night Ethan and Leo moved in with me. Life for the three of us in our little Portland home was calm, simple, and full of warmth. Every morning I got up early to make breakfast for the two of them, oatmeal for Leo, black coffee for Ethan, and a cup of ginger tea for me. We ate to birdsong on the porch and pale sunlight slipping through the curtains. The house no longer echoed with fights, only with laughter and the small, everyday sounds of family. Ethan worked steadily at an engineering office downtown, no longer pressured to keep up a showy life. And Leo, my grandson, transferred to the neighborhood public school, a small, friendly place. Every afternoon I picked him up at the gate. He'd run toward me, backpack bouncing, shouting, "Grandma, today my teacher said I write the best in class." I laughed and patted his head. "Is that because you got your storytelling from me?" He nodded, beaming. One evening at dinner, Leo suddenly said in his clear little voice, "I like this house better, Grandma." "Here." No one yells. That short sentence made both Ethan and me go still. I looked at my son and saw the corner of his mouth tremble, his eyes rimmed red. I set my hand on his shoulder and said softly, "See, Ethan? Kids only need peace, not a castle." He bowed his head and murmured, "I know, Mom." From that day on, I understood the most precious thing I'd kept wasn't the house, not the money, it was the peace growing in the hearts of the two men I love most. That fall, I did something I never thought I would. I started a club for older women called Grandmothers Rising. The idea came while chatting with Helen on a slow afternoon. She laughed. "Do you know your story has spread through the whole neighborhood? The ladies at church keep asking me, 'How did Marjorie dare to cut the money and the control like that?'" I chuckled. "Dare? I just did what I should have done long ago." Helen shrugged. "Then teach others how to do it." I thought about it and she was right. So I wrote a small notice and posted it on the church board. "Have you been used or dismissed because of your age or your kindness? Come talk with me, Marjorie Bennett. We'll learn how to say enough without feeling guilty." The first meeting had only 3 people, me, Helen, and Mrs. Jensen, an 80-year-old widow whose daughter-in-law controlled her bank accounts. We sat in my living room, drank tea, told stories, and laughed until we cried. The second meeting had 7, the third 12. Then the number kept growing until we had to borrow the church hall to fit everyone. I taught basic money management, how to read bank forms, and most importantly, how to protect themselves from family who abuse their love. One day, Mrs. Jensen squeezed my hand, tears falling. "Thank you, Marjorie. Yesterday, for the first time, I told my son no when he asked to borrow money, and you know what? I still slept like a baby." I smiled and squeezed back. "See? No isn't a cruel word. It's the first word of freedom." Grandmothers Rising became a lifeline for dozens of older women in the area. Many came just to listen, to be heard, to know they weren't alone in being used, dismissed, or told they were useless. One morning after a session, a woman named Linda came up to me, eyes wet. "Mrs. Bennett, I just want to say, your story saved me. I watched your interview on the local channel, and the next day I told my husband, I'm not signing any more loan papers." I laughed and hugged her. "Good job, Linda. Sometimes just stopping means you've already won." In December, when Portland wore a light coat of snow, I got a handwritten envelope, rare in a world of email. The slanted, careful script read, "To Mrs. Marjorie Bennett." I opened it, and my heart dipped at the first line. It was Clara. "Mrs. Marjorie, I don't know if you want to read this, but I still want to write. After leaving Ethan, I had to live the life I feared most, poor, tired, and alone. But only then did I understand how right you were. I used to look down on serving tables, yet now I'm grateful it taught me the value of sweat. I used to think self-respect was a luxury. Now I know it's the one asset no one can take. Thank you. Because of you, I learned to be independent. Clara." I finished reading and sat quietly for a long time. Outside, snow fell gently against the window, soft and pure, like forgiveness. I folded the letter and set it by the old family photo, not to cling to the past, but to remind myself, forgiveness isn't because they deserve it, it's because I deserve peace. A few months later, I was invited by the Portland Department of Social Services. They wanted me as an advisor for the Senior Dignity Program. The call came from a young manager named Allison. Her voice was eager. We need you to share your story and help design financial workshops for seniors. Would you be willing?" I laughed. "I'm 70, Allison." She answered right away, "Which is exactly why we need you." I said yes. Not for recognition, but because if my story could help even one woman stand up, all those painful years would be worth it. My first talk was in a small community center hall. About 70 people attended, mostly silver-haired women, a few men with their wives. I wore the navy dress, the one I chose on the night everything changed. When I stepped on stage, my heart beat slow but steady. I looked out at hundreds of eyes, tired, hurt, but still bright with hope. I smiled and began, "My name is Marjorie Bennett. I'm 70, and I lost almost everything before I learned how to keep myself." The room went quiet. I told my story, no dramatics, no chest beating, just pieces of real life. The rain, the night I was turned away, the quiet hours, freezing accounts, and the moment I watched my grandson sleep safely in my arms. When I finished, I said, "Loving yourself isn't selfish. It's how you save yourself from being forgotten. When we learn to say, 'Enough,' we don't lose anyone, we simply find the person we used to be." The hall erupted in applause. Many stood, tears flowing. An elderly woman came up, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Thank you, Marjorie. I'm going home to say enough to my 50-year-old son." I smiled and hugged her back. In that moment, I knew I had truly been reborn, not through money or status, but through the courage to live honestly. That evening, when I got home, I found Leo at the table doing homework. Ethan sat beside him reading. The small room glowed warm with lamplight, the scent of ginger tea drifted everywhere. I sat down, opened my laptop, and replayed a clip from the talk. Near the end, there was a moment where I looked straight into the camera and said, "If you're listening and you feel forgotten, remember, old age isn't a period at the end of your life. It's a chapter you can write with your own hand. Don't let anyone else hold the pen." I closed the screen and smiled softly. Outside, Portland was quiet. Moonlight spilled onto the porch, glinting on the lavender I replanted last year. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and felt full of peace. At 70, I'm no longer the woman standing outside my son's door in the rain. I am Marjorie Bennett, the woman who learned to stand tall, love herself, and help others do the same. Life doesn't end with age. Sometimes it's only just beginning. It's been over a year since my life turned. Life for the three of us, me, Ethan, and Leo, is completely different now. The little house at the end of Magnolia Street where I lived alone for so many years is always full of a child's laughter. Every morning, as sunlight filters through the curtains, Leo runs barefoot into the yard, feet on the wet grass, shouting, "Grandma, I love you most in the world." That sentence melts my heart, and all the humiliation and loneliness of that rainy night suddenly feel worth it. I often watch him play and think, if I'd been weak that day, this boy might not be smiling like this now. Ethan now has a steady job at a construction firm. He's paid off his debts, lives simply, and spends more time with his son than with work or status. Every time he holds Leo, I see something in his eyes, no longer fear or shame, but deep gratitude. One evening, as we sat on the porch, he said, "Mom, I lost my wife, but I found you, and I found myself." I just smiled and said nothing. Sometimes a mother's greatest happiness isn't in apologies, it's in seeing her son finally grow up in character. One early autumn afternoon, Leo brought home a writing assignment. He waved the fresh, inky paper, excited. "Grandma, my teacher gave us, write about your hero. Guess who I chose?" I smiled, pretending to ponder. "Your dad?" "No." He shook his head, eyes bright. "My grandma." I laughed and ruffled his hair. "So what can your hero do?" He read aloud, voice clear as morning light. "My hero is my grandma. She taught me that kindness doesn't mean staying quiet." I froze. For a second, my throat tightened. Those simple, clumsy words held the meaning of my whole life. I turned away, wiped my tears, and whispered, "You did great, Leo. I'm proud of you." I didn't cry from pain, but from happiness. I once stood alone in cold rain, but in that moment, I knew the rain had washed everything clean to make room for a new spring. In the years that followed, I kept hosting small talks for older women in the neighborhood. We still called the group Grandmothers Rising. Grandmothers who stand up. No stage, no spotlights. Just a few dozen wooden chairs around a table, a pot of hot tea, and stories so real they ached. One elderly woman said, "I just told my 35-year-old daughter enough after 20 years of unconditional support." Another shared, "I got divorced last week, at 68, because I'm done hearing, 'You can't do anything anymore.'" Every meeting was a journey of release. I realized strength doesn't spread through money, it spreads through courage. When one woman dares to stand up, 10 others start to believe they can too. One winter day, while I was sorting papers, Helen brought an envelope. "For you, from California," she said. I opened it, and my heart dipped at the familiar line, "Clara." I took a deep breath and began to read. "Marjorie, for the past 2 years I've worked in a restaurant and paid my own way. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for forcing me to grow up, because otherwise I'd still be a selfish woman who only knows how to blame others. I'm getting remarried now this time, to someone who truly loves me, not my money. Wishing you peace, Clara." When I finished, I went still. A breeze at the window stirred the white curtain, carrying a faint scent of lavender through the room. I folded the letter, set it beside my late husband's photo, and smiled softly. Forgiveness isn't because they deserve it, it's because I deserve peace. I whispered as if speaking to his spirit, "Frank, that girl finally understands." Maybe every trial we endured left something good for someone else. A few months later, the local paper unexpectedly ran a story about me, titled, "A 70-year-old woman who's changing how hundreds of families treat their parents." They called me Portland's inspiration. I just smiled. I'm no hero, I'm a mother who was once left in the rain and then learned to hold an umbrella for herself. That article spread faster than I expected. Soon after, I received an invitation to join the Senior Dignity Program, a project supporting seniors who are financially abused. The program lead called and spoke with warm respect. "Mrs. Bennett, we heard your story and believe you can help many people find their own voice again." I agreed without hesitation. From someone who was hurt, I became someone who helps others find shelter in the sun. Now I understand one thing clearly. Kindness is not the same as endurance. I teach Leo that every day. One afternoon, as we were walking through the park hand in hand, he asked, "Grandma, when I grow up, how do I make sure I don't treat people badly like my mom did?" Such an innocent question, yet it tightened my heart. I sat down, looked at him for a long moment, then answered softly, "Just remember that respect begins with thank you. When you're grateful to people, you'll never take them for granted." He nodded, eyes shining. I believe the seed of kindness was planted at just the right time. Life at 70 is simple and full. In the morning, I drink coffee on the porch and listen to the birds. In the afternoon, I walk with Helen and we share old stories. At night, I read letters from everywhere, women telling me my story helped them stand up, say, enough, or simply believe they still matter. Every message is a small ray of light. A woman in Texas wrote, "Mrs. Marjorie, I stopped sending money to my son after 10 years. I think you'd be proud of me." A lady in Florida messaged, "Thank you. I divorced after 40 years of insults, and now I'm learning piano." I'm 72. I read every line and the tears fell on their own. Not from sorrow, but from gratitude, because I didn't let that long-ago rainstorm put out my fire. I looked straight into the camera during the final taping for the Senior Dignity Project. My voice shifted gently toward the audience, as if speaking directly to you, the one watching this story. If you've stayed with me to this point, maybe you've loved someone so much you forgot yourself. But please remember, kindness shouldn't become a chain. Sometimes saying enough isn't an ending, it's the beginning of freedom. I paused, letting my breath fall in step with the listener's heartbeat. Outside the window, a light rain began, each drop tapping the wood frame like a familiar tune. I turned to the audience and smiled with all the peace I have. I'm Marjorie Bennett, 70 years old, and this is my story, how one rainy night turned me from weak to free. If this story touched you, tell me where you're watching from. I truly want to know how far it's traveled. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or tap like if you believe justice sometimes begins with a heart that's hurt but unbroken. Thank you for listening to the voice of a 70-year-old mother who learned that loving herself is also a way to love her family. I looked up at the window. The rain still fell gently, but this time I didn't feel cold. I felt my heart full of light, the light of forgiveness, of freedom, and of the women rising with me all over the world. I whispered, as if to everyone who has endured yet still believes in goodness, that rainy night is over, but its legacy is hearts that are no longer afraid.